Bom dia a todos. Antes de mais, queríamos dar-vos as boas-vindas. Esta é uma primeiríssima conferência, podemos dizer internacional, porque temos não só oradores internacionais. Eu vou fazer aqui um pouco uma partilha de línguas. I'm welcoming everybody, just for the ones that are non-Portuguese speakers. Queria também agradecer não só ao Paulo, mas ao resto da direção, que tem sido incansável no desenvolvimento do ecossistema de Interim Management em Portugal. E já agora queria passar também a palavra ao Paulo.
Muito obrigado, bom dia a todos. Votos de uma boa sessão. Esta sessão é um marco histórico, no histórico ainda muito recente da Associação, e espero que seja, digamos aqui, um boost importante para o crescimento futuro da nossa Associação. E um agradecimento especial também à Reitoria da Universidade. A Reitoria, à Senhora Reitora da Universidade Europeia, também agradecemos a presença do Sr. Secretário de Estado e também o patrocínio da Randstad, já agora também. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado. Passaríamos a palavra à Senhora Reitora.
Muito bom dia a todos. Vou tentar ser muito breve, começando por dar as boas-vindas, um agradecimento especial ao Sr. Secretário de Estado, que teve a gentileza e a generosidade de se juntar a nós neste dia, naturalmente que aos responsáveis pela Associação de Interim Management e a todos os presentes, presenciais, fisicamente aqui na nossa Quinta do Bom Nome, um dos nossos campos, e também online. Eu gostaria de muito brevemente, e para aqueles que se calhar em muitos casos estão na nossa casa pela primeira vez, de contar muito rapidamente a história da Universidade Europeia e fundamentalmente a história que queremos construir para o futuro. A Universidade Europeia, falava eu ainda há pouco, sofre de dores de crescimento, que são sempre as melhores dores. Vivemos ao mesmo tempo um momento especial, que é o momento em que nos preparamos para comemorar os 10 anos de existência enquanto universidade, falo-emos no próximo ano, mas ao mesmo tempo comemoramos também neste preciso momento os 60 anos de ensino superior, porque a Universidade Europeia foi constituída a partir do ISLA, que continua a ser a marca mais antiga em sede de ensino superior privado em Portugal, e nomeadamente naquilo que é o ensino GRH. Tivemos há 15 dias atrás muitos responsáveis de recursos humanos das principais empresas nacionais que fizeram a sua formação aqui e que muito emocionalmente receberam este nosso momento. E, portanto, eu costumo dizer que nós gostamos de olhar para a história e para o passado, pensando fundamentalmente no presente e no futuro que queremos construir. Somos uma universidade que fechará o ano 2022 com cerca de 10 mil alunos, é um marco também muito importante para a nossa atividade. Somos uma universidade que hoje se constitui em torno de 4 faculdades, a Faculdade de Ciências da Saúde, que foi constituída há cerca de 10 dias atrás. E porquê? Porque queremos ser um player muito relevante nesta área. A Universidade Europeia faz parte de um grupo ibérico ao qual se juntam mais 3 universidades em Madrid, Valência e Canárias. Temos lá 65% de alunos a frequentar programas de Ciências da Saúde. É um número muito relevante e temos de facto lá as melhores infraestruturas, os melhores equipamentos que se posicionam como uma referência até internacional. Queremos ter a possibilidade de trazer isso para Portugal. Temos a faculdade online, a primeira faculdade do país assente numa metodologia 100% online. Temos, neste momento, 9 programas conferentes de grau, 3 licenciaturas, 6 mestrados e posicionamos, neste momento, retirando aqui o player, que é a Universidade Aberta, que naturalmente tem um posicionamento muito próprio e sempre atuou nesta modalidade de ensino-aprendizagem, posicionamos aqui realmente como first movers e como uma instituição que se quer, na verdade, também marcar pela diferença em sede de qualidade nesta nova abordagem de ensino-aprendizagem, que é uma metodologia que faz todo o sentido também quando falamos de Interim Management e quando falamos daquelas que são as novas necessidades e as novas tendências no mercado profissional para o futuro, que tem a ver com a necessidade de uma aprendizagem ao longo da vida. Temos o IAD, uma marca de enormíssima reputação, onde temos quase 3.000 alunos, lá embaixo em Santos, uma faculdade que também tem 50 anos de existência enquanto marca, que tem formado muitos milhares de profissionais na área do design, na área do marketing, e onde estamos também a crescer para novas áreas de conhecimento que se colocarão claramente como profissões do futuro. E temos aqui na Quinta do Bom Nome e na Lispolis a Faculdade de Ciências Sociais e Tecnologia, com mais cerca de 3.000 alunos, onde atuamos nas áreas das ciências sociais, mas onde também temos vindo a estender a nossa oferta formativa para as áreas da tecnologia, da digitalização, nomeadamente e, por exemplo, com a nova licenciatura em Ciência de Dados e Gestão, que também nos parece que dará a possibilidade de formar aqueles que são também novos profissionais. Todos sabemos, nesta sala, com certeza, que muitas das profissões do futuro são profissões que ainda não existem no presente e, portanto, é fundamental termos a capacidade de antecipar e de garantir uma formação adequada para aqueles que são os jovens, mas que serão os novos profissionais do futuro e muito provavelmente membros desta associação, que é uma associação que para nós faz todo o sentido também. E porquê? Porque nós assentamos a nossa abordagem na relação com os nossos alunos num modelo académico que consideramos e denominamos de base experiencial, um modelo académico que naturalmente assenta na dimensão do saber, mas assenta fundamentalmente e muito, e acho que é essa a grande relevância e que me apraz sublinhar neste momento convosco, na dimensão do saber fazer. E o saber fazer não se faz apenas com a capacidade de termos excelentes profissionais, excelentes académicos, que do ponto de vista conceptual conseguem, e desculpem-me a expressão mais coloquial, debitar matéria em sala de aula. Esta dimensão do saber fazer faz-se pela nossa vontade, por aquilo que consideramos ser um fator crítico de sucesso, que é trazer organizações, trazer profissionais para dentro do campus e levar-nos a nós próprios para fora do campus, numa relação que consideramos absolutamente win-win. Só dessa forma é que seremos capazes de implementar aquilo que é o nosso plano transformacional para Portugal. O fundo que nos detém aprovou um investimento de 80 milhões de euros para a Universidade Europeia em Portugal, para investimento nos próximos 3 anos. Estamos a falar de um valor muito relevante, mas fundamentalmente um valor que, mais do que os números, se refletirá na nossa capacidade de fazer diferente, na nossa capacidade de nos diferenciarmos exatamente por esta base experiencial, pela nossa capacitação de levar os nossos alunos excelentes profissionais para o mercado de trabalho e também excelentes pessoas, porque os valores sociais são para nós determinantes. Consideramos que esta conferência que hoje recebemos aqui com todo o gosto e que faz parte de uma parceria que temos vindo a aprofundar com esta associação, se coloca como mais uma evidência muito relevante e muito evidente, desculpe a redundância, daquilo que estamos a fazer, trazer-vos para dentro do nosso espaço, abrirmos o espaço à discussão e com isto abrir caminho para novas abordagens do ponto de vista do ensino, do ponto de vista da formação e do ponto de vista daquilo que levamos para o mercado profissional. Muito obrigada a todos e um excelente dia de trabalho.
Rapidamente passaria a palavra ao Secretário de Estado, o Dr. Gabriel Bastos.
Muito bom dia a todas e a todos. Senhora Reitora da Universidade Europeia, Professora Doutora Hélia Gonçalves Pereira, Senhor Presidente da Associação Interim Management Portugal, Dr. Rui Serapicos, e também aos demais membros da direção, os meus cumprimentos, caras e caros conferencistas, minhas senhoras e meus senhores. Começo por cumprimentar obviamente, todos os presentes e também por congratular a Universidade Europeia e a Associação Interim Management de Portugal pela organização desta primeira conferência internacional. É por isso, naturalmente, um gosto poder representar a Sra. Ministra Ana Mendes Godinho e o Ministério do Trabalho, Solidariedade e Segurança Social neste encontro, que reúne um conjunto reputado de oradores especialistas nesta matéria. A realização desta conferência constitui, naturalmente, uma oportunidade para o crescimento da associação, para a mobilização e dinamização dos diferentes atores intervenientes no mercado. Para isso, a partilha de conhecimento especializado e a reflexão sobre os desafios e as tendências constitui, sem dúvida, o método mais adequado para compreender as dinâmicas e, em face disso, delinear estratégias realistas para o futuro. Esta nova forma de emprego, assim categorizada pelo Eurofound, tem como característica, como sabemos, a contratação temporária de profissionais altamente especializados na resolução de novos desafios organizacionais específicos. A forma mais dirigida, focada, rápida e eficaz de como os interim managers colocam o saber e as suas experiências acumuladas ao longo da sua carreira ao serviço do crescimento e transformação das empresas, se bem aplicado, desenvolve a economia e pode, de facto, dinamizar o mercado de trabalho. A adequação de novas formas de trabalho, num mundo, como sabemos, é cada vez mais globalizado, com desafios de gestão cada vez mais exigentes também, leva ao desenvolvimento de novas soluções, não só do lado empresarial, como também do lado do Estado, na forma como nos relacionamos com esta nova realidade em permanente mutação e com um crescimento bastante acelerado. Uma das lições que todos pudemos aprender nestes últimos anos, designadamente com a experiência da pandemia Covid-19, é que, de facto, esta ligação entre o Estado e as empresas, e para além das empresas, com as famílias, com os trabalhadores, tem de ser acompanhada de flexibilidade, de transformação e também de uma constante adaptação. Porventura, poucos imaginavam, antes da ocorrência da pandemia, que a Segurança Social poderia criar, de um mês para o outro, novas prestações sociais, novos apoios e ter uma relação completamente digital com as pessoas e as empresas. Em termos práticos, a pandemia evidenciou duas realidades que procuramos não ignorar. A importância dos cidadãos e das cidadãs estarem devidamente inscritos, formalizados no mercado de trabalho e enquadrados no sistema de proteção comum. E, por outro lado, a necessidade do sistema ter capacidade em se reinventar, simplificando e flexibilizando procedimentos em prol do seu maior desígnio, garantir a todos o direito à segurança social, conforme inscrito no artigo 63 da nossa Constituição. As estatísticas evidenciam esta constatação. Atingimos um número recorde de trabalhadores. 4.929.000, mais 123.000 face a 2019, dos quais 3.497.000 com contrato sem termo, ou seja, mais um crescimento de 215.000 trabalhadores face a 2019. Temos salários e emprego a crescer com as remunerações no setor privado em mais 4,9% e mais 6,2% do número de trabalhadores. Portugal registrou em setembro deste ano a segunda maior descida da taxa de desemprego jovem da Europa, descendo da 5ª para a 9ª posição. A taxa de precariedade laboral está em níveis historicamente baixos, atualmente nos 16,5%, quando compara com 22% entre 2012 e 2019. A situação vivida nos últimos anos pela crise pandémica deu razão e valor à existência de um Estado social capaz, robusto, com uma segurança social presente na proteção dos postos de trabalho, no apoio às empresas, na defesa dos rendimentos das famílias, na garantia de direitos dos pensionistas ou na prestação de apoios mais diretos às famílias. Em termos do mercado de trabalho, além da formalização, apostamos também nas políticas integradoras dos migrantes, nas políticas de promoção da natalidade, um tema crítico para o nosso país e para o mundo em geral, com o reforço do abono de família ou também com a medida inovadora e já implementada das creches gratuitas, que tem, como todos podem facilmente compreender, um potencial muito grande nesta matéria. Mas também na implementação do acordo recentemente alcançado em concertação social com os parceiros sociais de melhoria de rendimentos e competitividade, ou também, para dar outro exemplo, na concretização da agenda para o trabalho digno e valorização dos jovens no mercado de trabalho, e aí especificamente nas matérias de conciliação da vida profissional e familiar, ou no reforço e adequação das licenças de parentalidade. Estamos assim a adaptar o sistema ao que sabemos serem as necessidades de hoje, mas também às exigências dos tempos vindouros. Compete-nos igualmente explicar e simplificar o sistema para que o mesmo seja simples, flexível e claro. Por isso, no âmbito do PRR, da Segurança Social, estamos, através de um programa que designamos CLIC, estamos a proceder à transformação digital de todo o sistema, que vai, estamos em querer, alterar o paradigma do modelo de relacionamento com aqueles que são os nossos utentes, ou para usar uma outra expressão também comum, embora não seja a minha preferida, os nossos clientes. Ao nível do relacionamento com as empresas, pretende-se recuperar o atraso relativamente ao processo de transição digital, permitindo o acesso ao conhecimento e aos meios tecnológicos digitais que promovem, entre outros, a modernização do trabalho e dos processos de produção, a desmaterialização dos fluxos de trabalho, a mitigação dos déficits de competências na utilização das tecnologias digitais, e aí, através do Instituto de Emprego e Formação Profissional, temos em desenvolvimento e já operacionais um conjunto importante de programas de reskilling e upskilling que podem ter para o futuro na nossa economia também um impacto muito positivo, mas também a incorporação de ferramentas e metodologias de teletrabalho, a adoção de uma cultura de experimentação e inovação. Sabemos bem o quão estratégico e crítico também é toda esta dimensão para o nosso desenvolvimento coletivo e a dinamização da nossa economia. O reforço do ecossistema de empreendedorismo nacional e, por fim, a incorporação de tecnologias disruptivas nas propostas de valor das empresas. No que concerne o sistema de segurança social, e permitam-me que continue a puxar um pouco a brasa à minha sardinha, a nossa ambição é muito clara. Modernizar a segurança social, adaptar o sistema aos tempos modernos, integrando novas formas de trabalho, garantindo a proteção social e mantendo os direitos e as obrigações que constituem, naturalmente, um pilar fundamental no nosso Estado Social. Caras e caros conferencistas, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, os modelos de organização e de gestão são confrontados a todo o tempo com o reflexo da transformação muito acentuada das sociedades modernas. Esta pressão constante, no contexto de economias globalizadas e em estreita conexão, obrigam-nos a questionar as formas tradicionais de abordarmos os problemas. A realidade apresenta-se-nos hoje com tonalidades mais indefinidas e com níveis superiores de complexidade, para além de integrar uma componente de imprevisibilidade que não pode ser descurada por quem quer que seja. Daí a capacidade de atuar sobre essa mesma realidade de forma pronta e simultaneamente com sentido estratégico se revela muitas vezes como o fator mais crítico para alcançar resultados positivos para uma qualquer empresa, para uma qualquer instituição, enfim, para uma qualquer organização. Isto exige seguramente uma mudança de paradigma, na medida em que implica a adoção de novas perspectivas e um olhar diferente sobre a forma de fazer as coisas. As empresas, as instituições, as organizações em geral, como dizia, precisam de também elas se reinventar, de repensar as suas estratégias e processos em ciclos cada vez mais curtos, para fazer face às dinâmicas concorrenciais e para ultrapassar constrangimentos conjunturais, que sempre existem, ou situações de impasse, as quais podem reclamar um impulso, se quiserem um choque, de inovação que corrija a trajetória ou, na melhor das hipóteses, transporte consigo um novo impulso, uma nova energia criativa à missão, à atividade desenvolvida por essas mesmas organizações. Ao fim e ao cabo, se quiserem, um acelerador de mudança, protagonizado por quem se encontre devidamente apetrechado guardemos estar a reunir as condições técnicas para prosseguir. De qualquer forma, estou praticamente a terminar, portanto, se for um aviso... mas dizia eu que essa mudança, esse acelerador de mudança, deve ser protagonizado por quem se encontre devidamente apetrechado com o manancial de recursos técnicos, motivacionais e naturalmente, de experiência acumulada. Aqui o fator experiência acumulada é o saber fazer, o know-how, como há pouco a Sra. Reitora referia, é fundamental, mas também a aprendizagem ao longo da vida, aquela expressão anglo-saxónica que se utilizava no passado, lifelong learning, é, sem dúvida, continua a ser uma peça fundamental e são dois componentes que são absolutamente necessários para este desenvolvimento de novas competências que vão ser necessárias. Ou seja, um gestor com competências específicas e diferenciadas que consiga, num horizonte temporal limitado, intervir sobre as diferentes variáveis determinantes através de decisões estratégicas certeiras ou cirúrgicas, porque, por vezes, não há, efetivamente, grande margem para erro. Decisões essas que, desejavelmente, conduzirão a resultados operacionais favoráveis ou mais vantajosos, dito de outra forma, que acrescentam valor ao balanço. É, pois, neste contexto que o Interim Management deve suscitar atenção e interesse, razão pela qual a realização desta primeira conferência, que será seguramente a primeira de muitas conferências e de muitos eventos da Associação, merece ser assinalada e saudada, constituindo um sinal importante para o investimento a fazer neste domínio, para que a reflexão sobre o caminho a percorrer e, sobretudo, sobre a forma de dar passos seguros e consistentes nessa mesma caminhada, se possa fazer com partilha de informação, partilha de conhecimento, troca de experiências, porque essa é sempre a metodologia mais valiosa para, de facto, conseguirmos traçar um rumo naquilo que queremos fazer. Não vou poder acompanhar-vos durante os trabalhos desta manhã, mas desejo que possam ser o mais profícuos possível e, sobretudo, desejo muito êxito aos trabalhos da Associação para o Futuro e muito obrigado a todos.
So now we're going to shift to English. Hopefully Tony Evans will be on the call. Actually, he's on the call, but he's not on. Here he is. So I just like to briefly introduce Tony. He's not only an experienced interim manager, but he's also the chair of the Interim Management Association of the UK. He's been in the market for many long years, and it will be a pleasure to hear him out and actually to understand how has the market evolved, and also what is the perspective of interim management in these new times to come. Tony, thank you very much for your presence, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Rui. Can everybody hear me okay in the auditorium? If that's okay. In order to be able to do the presentation, I'll need to be able to have the screen sharing facility enabled so I can share some slide information. And while that's happening, can I just offer my congratulations to you all on the performance of the Portuguese football team yesterday evening, which seemed to have an extremely good time.
Tony, can you check if you can share now your screen?
Yeah, I'm just having a go now. So, can you see that okay? So, good. Okay. Great. Right. Technology is working. Excellent news. Okay. So, just to consolidate who I am, as Rui was kind enough to say, I'm currently the chair of the Institute of Interim Management, and I've been an interim CEO now for over 25 years. And in that time, I've accumulated a client added value in excess of $940 million. The next new normal is the theme that Rui and I discussed, and it's the agenda, I think, for today, trying to determine what that might be. The point here, I think, is that we've experienced enormous global change over the last 15 years. People in business generally benefit from stability and clarity, or at least knowing where they are going and how to operate effectively. It's not surprising then to be asking just what our circumstance is going to be over the next few years. So the overall purpose of the presentation is to share some data and stimulate thinking about what this means for how each of us operates in our own chosen profession. Now, as chair of the IIM, I get asked regularly about where do I see the interim market going and what is happening now. The questioning really is all down and underpinned by a concern to know how to secure paid work. So the presentation this morning is in three parts. We'll take a quick look at some significant events over the last 15 years, then give consideration to certain international trends, and then share some thoughts about a number of major impactors going forward. So, looking back, I'm presenting now a list of some key players, any of whom could bring about further world conflict. There are many arguments for varying political views, but the point here, for us is what is the impact on our professional lives? Continuing our theme of major events since 2008, here are examples of centrally driven, financially oriented issues that have impacted the real economy. These effects feel like stability proves harder to achieve as time passes, and there is so much cash which is washing around global markets, searching for a home of worthwhile returns. With these major events, we are starting to see the consequences. So as a result of the changes, there are more global movements and stresses on country populations. Major changes impact some fundamental global industries. Energy supply, high technology innovation, health, and product supply have all become visible strategic issues at country and global level. And of course, government lockdown responses to the pandemic cause enormous economic disruption. Having taken a view of events that happened, I now want to move on to look at some effects, starting here with a figure showing quantitative easing history. The bump that you can see down here in 2008-9 is the initial impact of the financial crisis, and this is when the idea of QE was first seriously taking hold. The major shift on the curve, of course, is in 2020, and caused by government responses to the pandemic. What I'd just like to draw your attention to on this particular figure is just this little bit over here, this scale. It's in trillions of dollars. I'd just like to pause on that for a moment because I think it's worth thinking about what that means. A trillion, just 1 trillion, is 1 followed by 12 zeros. That is a million. So since Christ was born, there have been about 730,000 days. So, if I was sufficiently benevolent, I could give someone $1 million every day for the whole of that period and still have over 25% of my money left. I've got a couple of figures now to share on energy pricing, and the first is on oil price history. So this goes back all the way to the 1970s, but looking at it, we can see that various world events, especially supply, where supply is affected, have a significant impact on prices. This is a classic supply-demand relationship, coupled with the core position for energy throughout the world economy. And there is a direct link, of course, to inflation, with sensitivity globally and not just in Europe. However, for this particular scenario, is there a solution in sight? Could we see some form of organised move to local green energy supply, perhaps? And that could be both good from our perspective defensively and economically. Gas price history tends to be more regional than the impact of oil, and this graph is shown for the EU. Can I just also point out that this is about price and not supply? Generally, on this figure, we can see a steady and low price for about half the period. Then the first real disruption is at the financial crisis, here. and then followed by a gradual recovery, then a low price situation in lockdown, and then, of course, what we're all familiar with currently, the final explosion with Russia's Ukrainian invasion. Next, let's take a look at inflation. So observing this figure here, which compares the UK and the EU's inflation rate over time, everything seems to be more or less okay with performance for the first half of the time period. Then we see the impact of the lockdowns in 2020. And then we see the economies open again. Supply problems start to emerge and price pressure starts in 2021. Then impact of energy prices in 2022, and that reinforces the upward move. This figure compares consumer price inflation by country from the more recent past. Looking at country variation, we can see that overall, countries generally follow a similar kind of pattern. There are some local variations, however, within that, and we can see, for example, that where France benefits from a lot of nuclear power, and Japan tends to have a rather different culture and economic condition to the other countries shown. This final figure is really just a UK CPI inflation history, and the purpose of the slide is really just to point to the issues of the 1970s in the UK, when things started to get really out of control for a while, with inflation hitting 25%. And there's a serious warning in all of this, I feel, for all of us. Another clear sign of economic disruption that we've experienced are container prices for shipping. And this figure demonstrates again that we've got pretty stable prices going along the graph there until we get well into 2020 and the pandemic. Lockdown throws the whole international supply chain out. I think this is quite a well understood effect, with empty containers sat in the west generally and product in store in the east. And as a result, the costs go up 10 times. And again, due to supply, demand, availability changes in a very dislocated system. Now, looking at the end of this figure, prices have dropped an enormous amount, but they're still 3 times roughly what they were 2 years ago. Just moving on now, I just want to take a quick look at the bond markets, and in particular 10-year government bond yield history. The graph shows that values have fallen gradually since the 1980s, in fact, largely associated with reasonable demand for these debt purchase instruments, which are seen as a safe investment. The approach is also seen as acceptable due to safety during periods of lower inflation. What we should just keep an eye on and remember is that there is an inverse relationship here between yield and bond price, and that's described through the equation that the coupon value divided by the price equals the yield. And more recently, interest rates have risen over after a period of very low values. Also, we should note the Western larger economies have incurred much more debt, and the safety element for government bonds has started to be questioned. The net effect has been a lowering of prices to attract more money to cover national debt, with the consequent rise in yield. Quantitative tightening, or QT, has started after many years of quantitative easing, or QE. Low interest rates and easy money to invest elsewhere. The phrase taking the punch bowl away reflects the change in terms of how the market might view the reduction of money supply. Just want to take a very quick look at currency movements. So starting with this figure showing the euro versus the dollar. And the key point really in this slide, which looks generally messy, but the point I want to make is really that it demonstrates the strength of the dollar versus the euro. And the next one is the pound against the euro. This shows a couple of things. Major change here, which is when the UK had its Brexit referendum, which showed what the currency markets thought about that result. And since then, we've traded about in this range 1.1 to 1.2 for pretty much all the time since then. Quite erratic within that band, but that's the band. And the final one is just to look at the pound versus the US dollar. So you can see that again, the Brexit effect crashing with the pound dropping in value there relative to the dollar. And then more recently, the absolute strength of the dollar really benefiting from it being the international currency. Finally, in looking at various effects, here is a figure that shows US corporate debt versus GDP with time and 3-month US government bonds. The grey vertical lines in it are periods of recession. And this, what you're seeing here is what happens when cheap money is available. The graph is an example of common trends globally. US-based information is very easy to get, well, much easier to get your hands on, hence showing it. What I'd like you to note is that every time there is a recession, corporate debt falls as balance sheets are strengthened. So you'll see that in the blue line. And that, as business people, we would all expect boards and companies to be doing, tightening their belts and making sure their balance sheets are okay. What we need to keep in mind is that governments use low central bank interest rates to stimulate borrowing to grow GDP through increased consumption. And my question for you to think about is this artificial? Are governments in danger of overinflating their economies? And is it therefore sustainable? Given these various effects, most of them are adverse. I'd just like you to keep 3 things in mind. Firstly, governments do effectively go bust. Secondly, money expansion is what governments do to reflate their country economy. And thirdly, government will want to inflate away as much debt as possible. And I think it's worth also keeping in mind that governments really only have 5 ways to be able to reduce their debt burden. They can increase taxes, which is usually unpopular with the electorate. They can issue more bonds, but we need to keep in mind they need to be redeemed at some point. So this is a high finance form of kicking the can down the road. They can facilitate growing the economy to increase the tax take. They can inflate away the debt value, or they can default. And a final point on this slide, these comments were made in September 2020, before things became even more complicated. And the link you'll see at the top of the slide is well worth going and having a look at if this kind of thing interests you. So, where does this leave us looking forward? Well, politically, I'm going to offer, these are personal views, not those of the Institute, I should add, is that the West needs to hold a line against the political bullying that we've been seeing increasingly of late. I think we should definitely play the Russian war on Ukraine to a good conclusion. Something to keep in mind as one example of what a good conclusion is, taking into account that already 100,000 Russian troops have been wounded or killed. As a point of note, this is good shop window for Western and particularly US defense technology. The activity also weakens Russia militarily and economically. Governments in general need to remember their central purpose, which is to satisfy their electorate's hygiene factors of being defended, being fed, and being kept warm and healthy. Another question is, can recession be minimized without excessive money supply? And finally, will we see real emotional intelligence from the global political elite? We might just be starting to see some of that in China, who today on the news were announcing a very significant relaxation of their current COVID policy. Here, I'm offering some themes that I think will be strong areas of interim work over the next 2 to 3 years. And I hope the rationale for these is evident from the economic impactors that I've described earlier in the talk. And finally, looking at the profession as a whole, I offer some thoughts about our commercial engagement processes. So, will more people be drawn into the profession? I don't know what it's like in Portugal currently, but in the UK, there is a growing lack of supply being seen within our interim market. Secondly, will we see a change in the basic routes to market at all? Historically, we have really only 2 routes, and one is we use our own personal network, and the other one is we use providers or slight variations on the provider theme. And the final point that I'm making here is perhaps we may start to see a change in the client engagement process, and that might well vary with client type. I think those are all relevant and important factors to be considering. So, I'd just like to thank everybody for listening to the presentation. I hope that you have found this thought-provoking, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions or respond to any thoughts that you may have. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Well, Tony, thank you very much for your presentation. The good news is that before this conference, I was having a conversation with Tony, and he asked me, what's going to happen if the sound and the system doesn't work? And I told him, I'll just tap dance and people will smile. And fortunately, I'm not having to tap dance. So if I'm not yet, exactly. So if I'm not having to tap dance, I would like the audience to ask some questions, because this is really an opportunity for each and every one of you to actually have challenge Tony. It doesn't probably everyone's a little bit looking at the slides and saying, this is depressing, isn't it? But here's an opportunity to challenge the views, as well as to say, well, there's something different happening. So I welcome everyone to use the microphone, and if not, I'll ask some questions myself. You can project your voice.
Rui, I can hear that somebody is speaking, but I cannot decipher what they're saying. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, he's going to come here and tap dance.
Oh, excellent.
Sorry, I'm kind of shy now, but well, my question was, I was asking, because you've been doing that for many years, and there's the culture changing in different countries, and you probably already faced that a few years ago, when you started the interim management processes. How do you see a way of facing that challenge of culture change regarding the kind of work that is interim work?
Nice. It's a short question, and the answer, I'm afraid, it could get very long. There has been a cultural change in the way that interim management is being addressed and how it's being received over, well, I've been doing this for a couple of decades or so now. I think it's gone in the right direction. So if I refer back to the last couple of years UK interim management annual surveys, each year over 90% of all the work that people do reported in the survey, and we get something like about 3,000 people responding to that survey each year. It's a big survey. Over 90% of the work involves significant change of some form. Now, when I first started, a large proportion of the work being done was very much holding the fort kind of work. So if somebody, take the classic example of a maternity leave, an interim would be brought in to just keep things steady while that person was on maternity leave. It's not the same today at all. The other thing that has happened, and I started to refer to it right at the end of the presentation, is the way that the process for engaging interims has changed. At one time of day, it was very clearly, and I refer now really to the UK experience, it was very clearly a business-to-business transaction. So you went to a client meeting and the discussion was largely between you and the person, the end client, the person who was going to be, or had the problem, and possibly included procurement, because it was going to be a business-to-business contract that would be agreed. Today, particularly in larger corporate settings, the process has become more involved with HR, and it takes on a lot more of the features of a classic permanent recruitment process. So it's quite difficult sometimes to get the client out of the mindset that you're not some kind of quasi-employee. You're there in business on your own account. The other thing that's happening, and I think in other countries in Europe, but particularly in the UK, is the problems which our taxation system is increasingly bringing to the party, because the taxman has noticed a drop in certain areas of tax as a result of a larger and larger proportion of the working population becoming freelance. So I'm talking about the whole spectrum of freelance work. And they're unhappy about that, not surprisingly. And so they have been legislating now for 20 years, making life, well, in fact, longer than 20 years now, making life more and more difficult for people like ourselves and for the end client trying to determine what the real relationship is. All of these things impact on the culture, if you like, of the way that we can operate and the way that work gets done. Does that help answer the question?
Go ahead.
Do you want me to continue, or shall I stop at that point?
He's coming again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm back, sorry. No, because I see that as an ongoing challenge on every direction, and it's probably been there since forever and will continue to move on. So do you think there's anything on our end when you're selling this kind of product to the client, or even to the candidate, let's say, bring it to my world, what perspectives can we show them in order to be attractive for both?
Okay, right.
Sorry, Tony, that's my part of the presentation.
Is it?
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Tony. Go ahead.
I'm quite happy passing that over, Rui.
But do go ahead, because it's always good to have an international perspective. I'll present some of the qualities of what's next interim manager, and what are the attributes and the qualities of interim manager. So,
okay.
But it's always good to see a contrast from the UK.
Right. I'll just pick on the aspect from the candidate point of view, to use the questioner's terminology. So from the individual interim's point of view, the IIM runs quarterly webinars for people who are thinking about coming into the world of interim. So what is it that would attract people into this sometimes bizarre profession? And the answer to that is, I don't think has changed a great deal over the years, to be honest. One of the things which is good is you are in business on your own account. You are your own boss. So you get the opportunity to decide what it is you want to do. The relationship is with a client, not with an employer. So you move away from, certainly in UK law, an employment contract comes from the traditional idea of the master-servant relationship in history. So if you're an employee and you're asked to do something, you do it. If you're an independent, an interim, that's not the relationship. The relationship is peer-to-peer. It is not master-servant. It's not parent-child in transactional analysis terms. So that's got an attraction for people who are serious about interim. You get, to be honest, to do all the interesting stuff. So where there's change, stimulation, the new bringing something new in, being creative, and being able to be impactful for the client. They're engaging you because they need you to be impactful. So for people interested in all of these are very exciting prospects. This is why people really want to do it, because they want to have a greater sense of control and being able to create and innovate and build. For me, it's a very constructive mindset. At the end of an assignment, I see it a bit like a painting, and I want to feel that I could put my signature in the bottom corner of this painting because I'm proud of what we've achieved.
Okay, I'll just leave it as that. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Okay. So my presentation, I'll do it in Portuguese, but if you have a couple of minutes just to comment, I'll add some dashes of English so that I'm sure you're going to follow it because it relates a little bit to the components that you've mentioned, a forthcoming recession, and what are the aspects or the qualities that clients tend to look for interim managers, and what interim managers should look for them in themselves.
Okay.
So I'll act as the AV guy. So why am I don't know if Tony, are you still there? Se o Tony fosse embora, então eu faço tudo em português. Porquê que eu coloquei esta imagem da aurora borealis? Não sei se alguém já experimentou a aurora borealis, é uma experiência verdadeiramente única, que acontece normalmente acima do Círculo Polar Ártico. Tem dois efeitos. Aquele efeito que nós vamos ter nos tempos que vêm, que é um efeito de assombro, mas depois de conhecimento e depois de habituação. E eu acho que é um bocadinho essa experiência que nós vamos ter nos tempos de recessão. Isto passou-se em 2008, 2011, 12, e vai voltar a acontecer. Ok, muito bem. Tony, I was asking you if you were still there, so it looks like you are. So, Tony?
Hi, can you hear me okay, Rui?
Yes, I can, but the mic doesn't seem to be working.
No, when you go away from the podium, I can't hear you.
Okay, so I'll stay in the podium.
Thank you.
Wait. Can you hear me now? Yes.
I can, yes. Well
yes,
done.
great. So I was saying to the audience that I've picked this picture essentially because the Northern Lights have this feeling or this impact on you whenever you experience it, and I invite everyone to have that experience. It's a bit of like what we'll experience in recession times. It's a bit of awe in the beginning because it looks pretty scary, but in the end you'll get accustomed to it. And I'm not going to say like in the Northern Lights that you're going to like it, because I don't think anyone's going to like what's coming. But it is important that we get accustomed to it and that we manage it in the best way possible. And that's probably the insights that I'm going to share with you today. So what are the insights, or how do I get this passed? So the agenda is what's the background, what are the challenges, what are the qualities of the interim managers, and how can interim management help in this situation of recession, and what are the principles and actions, as well as how do we see this coming. So in terms of background, I think Tony put it very well. which is essentially we've gone through a period between 2020 and today that has gone from even prior to the pandemic, a change of attitudes, a change of investment, as well as a change in the way we see the world. Eventually, we got into this social unrest and into this pandemic that we managed to solve. But after, I would say, June 2020, we got into inflation, into growing inflation, as well as concerns of sustainability, and to a certain extent, a new contract between workers and employers. And this led to a certain extent, I'll ask someone that is playing with my presentation to stop. So this led to the situation where there was a change of habit, but not just a change of habit, but also a change of relationship between employer and employee. So a lot of people heard about the Great Resignation. It has not happened in Portugal as someone or some would say that had the same impact in the US or in other European countries. But the real situation was that people changed the way they viewed the jobs, and people will even change the way that they view their career. So they want to be more independent, they want to have a bigger say, and sometimes they quit naturally because they can't withstand what is the current situation. With that said, we get this into this. What's next, and what's coming next in terms of interim managers and in terms of the clients? How can the clients, or what are the clients looking in situations of recession? We've had this situation back in 2008, 2011, as I said, and clients were looking for a change in their paradigm. They were looking for a transformation into their organization, and not, in some cases, not in the best way. So what is the change that we are facing now that is different than 2008, 2011? It's basically digital transformation and what I would call hyper-automation. So digital transformation, we went through two waves, the first one with COVID, and then the second one, which is we're facing now. We're actually hyper-automating organizations. So there are scarce resources, we're lacking in talent, so a lot of companies are actually coming in and putting a lot of bots, putting a lot of virtual assistants, robotic process automation, a lot of automation that will actually change the way that work is done. So one of my recommendations for any interim manager is actually not to become an expert on artificial intelligence, because that would have to be, it would have to be reborn. But in a future where automation and artificial intelligence will be integrated with talent, you don't need to be an expert on artificial intelligence. You need to be an expert on decision intelligence. You need to be an expert on understanding the rules, the governance, and the way that artificial intelligence develops decisions or supports decisions. So this is a triple squeeze, which Tony explained it very well. And by the way, we have not shared, well, he shared his presentation with mine, but I have not shared with Tony my presentation. And so what we have is a high persistent inflation, a scarce talent, and global restrictions in supply chain management. So this is the impact on margins. So everybody's looking very seriously now at me, because everybody's like, whoa, this is not this is not a good future, but there are some good news. And the good news, apart from this, that people are tired, that people are resigning, that finance is not at the same price or at the same liquidity as it was, we can see that actually retiring plans actually can be postponed to certain people. What we can see is a new, I don't want to say generation, but a new way of looking into business where it's needed. I don't know what's going on, if it's the mic or if it's this, but I can hear a lot of background. But, and you'll excuse me for this. But what we're seeing is a new generation of managers that will integrate technology or automation with decision making. And this is quite important, and this is why I'd like to share with you some of the challenges. So some of the challenges will be based on analyzing different pathways to solutions. And technology can help with that. And the other challenge, which is not coming through, it's basically getting ready for new changes. Because the only certain thing that we're going to face now is that the future will be changing very, very fast. So one of the qualities that I think one of the audience members was asking it, what are the traits that we should be, or that a client looks for, is the ability to adapt quickly. This is very important. And I've prepared some of my perspective of what are the qualities of an interim manager and what are the aspects that I believe that are quite differentiating. And this is my 50 cents. And I do welcome anyone to actually challenge my perspective. So what are the qualities? The qualities, I split them into three. Alignment. So by alignment, I mean alignment with the organization and with the team, alignment with the investment that companies may have, a vision that has to be inspiring, because nowadays, and yesterday I was talking with a group of people on why are people quitting. Most of the time is that people quit because of their bosses, not because of their contextual situation. And they quit because they don't see a vision, or they don't see an inspiring vision. And finally, a strategy that executes on that vision. So alignment is one of the most relevant components of interim managers' traits and qualities. So what's the next step, or what are the next components? Other than robust relationships, anticipation. And this is probably one of the biggest and the most, I don't want to say difficult, but one of the most challenging components of being an interim manager. It's the ability to predict and to manage uncertainty. People are not very good at managing uncertainty. So uncertainty means that the company has to have a differentiating approach. It has to have what I would call a risk balance. And what I mean by a risk balance is, a good example of this is what nowadays everybody's talking about, which is ESG. So environmental, societal, and governance challenges. And there's a massive push on ESG compliance. But with a recession, you have two pushes. One is to keep profitable, and the other one is to keep ESG. So what are you going to do? You have to accept certain risks and balance that. And the ability to anticipate change, as well as, in this case, the third component is adaptability. So the ability to change as you're driving. And that's probably one of the most challenging components of an interim manager. Because, and this is one aspect that I see as one of the most, there's a hard word to explain it, because people want vision, people want direction, and people want stability. But at the same time, as the market is changing so fast, executives, if they don't adapt quickly, they cannot keep the company or keep their assets or keep the company assets at a stable provision. So the balance has to be between sharing a vision, a stable vision, but changing at the same time. And this is a big paradox. And obviously changing the culture. So Tony mentioned that there's a lot of changes, economic changes, macroeconomic changes, political changes, geopolitical changes, technological changes, social changes. So if there are so many changes, also organizations are changing dramatically. Not just because of the external factors, but also because the fact that the new generations don't take the same rules as the older generations took. And this is another component that is really important, which is adapting to change and being able to convey and communicate that change. So here it says, how can interim management help? But it's covered by Tony. I hope you're still there, Tony. So how can we help? I see this in two components. One is defense, and now that we've passed to the new phase of football, or I see it as defense. So being very tight on costs, and I see it on the offense as well. So two main components. One for defense, which is being very tight on costs, being very conscious about how do we benchmark the costs, how do we establish cost optimization, and how do we monetize prices so that we can even at the same time renegotiate contracts, terms, and conditions. And the other component is actually going on the offense. So creating scorecards, accelerating digitalization, accelerating transformation, as well as accelerating cultural changes. So it's not all bad, and I'm going to go faster here because I know that I'm running a little bit out of time. So what are the principles? So not just for cost reduction, but also for cash is king, as everyone says during crisis, but you have to have an approach which is what I would call a ZBB, a zero-based budgeting. And everyone should look at zero-based budgeting in times of crisis, which are probably one of the best approaches to managing companies. In times of crisis, you just lower your budget to zero, and you scrutinize everything that is unnecessary. And you look for quick wins, as well as you don't freeze. You don't hire freeze, or you don't freeze buys. You just reduce it to operational efficiency, and you reduce it on the zero-based budget. And you plan to do it just once. Otherwise, if you're going to do it multiple times, the risk is that the whole organization will get very stressed. Obviously, people will say, well, but what happens if I needed to do it multiple times? Well, then you just need to have a different narrative. It's very important to have a different narrative. Otherwise, people will get very weary and will get very tired of all these cost cuttings. You examine, you benchmark the cost base. You obviously just, the sunk cost will be considered irrelevant, you are more holistic about the way that you look at costs, and you communicate a lot. And in a nutshell, that's the principles and actions that I would recommend for interim managers in the coming recession. Obviously, this is not new for interim managers that operated in recessions in 2008, 2009, and up till 2012, because that's what they were doing, and people have a very short memory of recessions. So with that said, cutting costs is not the objective. Actually, the objective is growth. And you have to invest on growth. And I'm not going to go through this decision model. I'm just going to recommend two actions for interim managers. One is actually expand the digital experience, and the other one is actually not ignore new technology. Because new technology is here, it's not against us, but it's for us. And with that, I think I'm almost finishing. This is my last 50 cents. In other words, manage costs, retain talent that is really relevant for your core business, and obviously accelerate digital. And I will leave this final say to hear yourselves and to hear Tony if you have any questions. So 3 minutes for questions. Any questions? One question, great. Can I get the mic? I'll give you the mic, yes, of course. It will.
Thank you. From both presentations, from yours and Tony's, one thing looks clear. First of all, there is a need. There is a need for interim management, and there is change. The question is, first of all, is there any country in Europe or abroad where there is a certification of interim managers? Understand if there's a benchmark. The second one is if there isn't, shouldn't certification of interim managers be a way, a mode to bring interim managers into the market? Things like change management, things like lean management, things like digital transformation. So in a nutshell, that's the question.
Well, that's a very good question. We haven't arranged for the question, but I'll give precedence to Tony, and if he doesn't answer, Tony will give the UK's perspective. Tony will give the UK's perspective, and I will give the Portuguese perspective, because that's what the Interim Management Association Board has been working on.
Yeah. Can you still hear me all right, Rui?
Sorry?
Can you still hear me okay?
Yes. Yes,
Great.
can.
Okay. I think it is a good question. In the UK, the Institute has an application for membership. It always has had. So there is an accreditation process that is undertaken, and people are then invited to join on the basis of whether they are recognised by the accreditation committee as being of the right standard. It is very difficult to do because as an institute we accept members from any function, any industry, any background who want to practice as interim managers. So finding a common curriculum against which we would rate people is very hard, and we have tried. So we tend to take a step back and we look at things from the point of view of, is this individual firstly serious about being a professional interim, And secondly, where they are practicing already, are they successful? Do they actually manage to deliver what it is the client requires? And we operate at that level. Now, I know that other countries, certainly in Europe, adopt a tighter approach, and things tend to become more examined, if you like, particularly where there is a strong financial flavour, which from my perspective tends to reflect the examined nature of the finance and accounting professions in general. But that's the issue from our point of view. It's really having something that would be universally acceptable and applicable to all different varieties of interim practitioner.
Okay, I'm going to answer in Portuguese, but the answer, Tony, just for you to know, we are working on this. Respondendo em português, a Associação de Interim Management, desde os seus primórdios, reconheceu a importância de formar ou de garantir a qualidade dos Interim Managers. Como o Tony disse e muito bem, o espectro de competências do Interim Manager ou de um portfólio de Interim Managers é muito grande. Porque há Interim Managers que fazem Turnaround Management, Crisis Management, Stakeholder Management, mentoring, coaching de startups, sudden departure, fazem arranque de operações, fecho de operações, ou seja, o espectro é muito grande. Seria mais fácil ter, vamos dizer, subcomponentes. E exatamente nesse capítulo foi isso que nós decidimos fazer. E curiosamente, não sei se está aqui alguém ainda da Universidade Europeia, eu espero, porque foi uma proposta que nós fizemos à Universidade Europeia, que é desenvolver um curso de gestão transformacional. Porque essencialmente o trabalho do Interim Manager é um gestor de transformação. E nesse curso, que é na prática uma pós-graduação de gestão transformacional, tem duas componentes. Tem uma componente core, onde são as áreas que são comuns a todos os Interim Managers, que têm a ver com gestão de tempo, otimização de processos, gestão de portfólio, a componente legal, a componente fiscal, que são críticas para o próprio Interim Manager. E depois, obviamente, também a componente contratual e de relação com o cliente, e os processos e as metodologias de Interim Management, que esse faz o core de Interim Management, do curso de Interim Management. E depois tem a componente mais, que eu chamo-lhe as camadas externas da cebola desse curso, que tem a ver com o quê? Com reestruturação financeira, transformação digital, novos modelos de negócio, otimização da relação com o cliente e por aí fora. Ou seja, são aquilo que são o core dos grandes papéis do Interim Manager ou de um Interim Manager, em que depois os presentes dessa formação conseguem escolher aquilo que se adequa mais ao seu objetivo de carreira. Não sei se respondi a esta questão, mas, e já agora voltando ao tema da Inglaterra, eu, há muitos anos atrás, fui à Inglaterra fazer um curso de certificação de Interim Management. Na altura não se chamava um curso de certificação, chamava-se um Induction Workshop da IMA, na altura ainda se chamava IMA, que era a Interim Management Association, que não é esta associação, entre aspas, não é este instituto. E essencialmente o curso era um curso intensivo que cobria múltiplas componentes, mas que não era tanto para a competência funcional do Interim Manager, mas era para a competência do próprio negócio do Interim Manager. E só para explicar aqui a diferença, que é, um Interim Manager tem que ter uma competência muito diferenciadora e um corte de skills muito, muito grande, mas também tem que perceber que vender os seus serviços de Interim Management tem um set de skills, ou tem um conjunto de competências muito diferente, e que essas competências podem ser aprendidas. E na altura, foi isso que eu fui à Inglaterra fazer. Não sei se agora respondi mais ou menos à sua questão, se ficou mais alguma dúvida. Sim, isso é a segunda componente da questão, que tem, segundo o meu ponto de vista, e os outros membros da direção acho que têm toda a propriedade para responderem, porque nós temos uma direção muito plural, temos uma direção com interim managers, temos uma direção é uma direção híbrida e com diferentes visões, mas relativamente à questão, a questão, como o Tony disse, é as estratégias go-to-market ou estratégias route-to-market, como estavam mencionadas na apresentação, são estratégias que têm a ver com a forma como o interim manager quer ir para o mercado. Ele pode querer ir com a sua própria marca, e há interim managers que fazem muito isso, criam a sua própria marca, também há interim managers que optam por fazer, vamos dizer, criar relações estratégicas com parceiros que sejam prestadores de serviço de interim management ou outras entidades. Essa escolha de go-to-market não está dependente nem da associação, nem dos provedores, mas literalmente do interim manager, da pessoa que quer tomar essa decisão. Uma coisa é certa, e respondendo à segunda componente da sua questão, que é, a associação está a fazer um esforço de, vou-lhe chamar evangelização, mas um esforço de comunicação profunda, e o exemplo é esta conferência, em que nós não só partilhamos a experiência dos interim managers que pertencem à associação, mas dos benefícios do interim management e também das relações internacionais que estão a ser estabelecidas, de forma a nós bebermos aquilo que se é feito internacionalmente e também podermos também exportar talento português. E essencialmente é isso que estamos a fazer, entre outras coisas. E eu estou-vos a impedir de irem para o café, por isso se houver mais alguma questão, estou disponível. Parece que o silêncio ganha, o café ganha pelo silêncio. Muito bem, obrigado. Thank you, Tony.
It's my pleasure. And thank you very much to everybody for the opportunity to join the conference this morning. I've enjoyed the time with you very much, and I wish you an excellent rest of day.
Thank you.
It's not until you fall that you.
Ciao, I am online. I see you, you see me. You know, no, no, no. Ah, okay, okay, okay. Let me. Okay, okay. Switched off. Okay. Oh, how can I do it? Because it's the minimum. Wait a moment. Let's make like that. Like that. Still the same. Ah, no, no, no. Oh, wait.
Estava aqui. Tenho que aceder ao meu irmão para fazer isso.
Eu vou já mandar, tá bem? Já tenho aqui a mão. Eu também tenho aqui. Não, eu já estou a mandar aqui para o Bardagi. Mas por agora estão todos aí. Já foi. Fazer por isso. Vai ficar?
Fico lá em cima, depois na hora das perguntas.
Can we put them here? So please remind me to take them.
Okay. Sorry, I think.
He speaks.
Okay.
Maurizio. Maurizio, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Maurizio?
Já desligou o mute também?
Eu já. Só que isto tem que projetar mais.
Isso depende muito da voz da pessoa.
Maurizio, can you reply just to confirm? Maurizio, can you hear me? You're on mute.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good, good.
Sergio, sim. Às vezes depende muito da voz, a gente fala mais alto.
You hear me?
Sim, creo que sim. It's okay.
Rui?
Yes, I can hear you, and
Okay.
we're about to start. Marcos, can
Hello.
you hear us? Great, Marcos.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. First of all, thank you everyone for being back. And the reason why I'm doing this in English again, because this is really an international conference, as we have at least 4 countries right at this panel. So we have Maurizio Quarta in Italy, we have Marcos Bardagi, that was so kind to be so early in the morning, I believe, in Brazil, and we have Pio with us. I will, out of deference, I will ask Marcos to give all of them to give a brief reference of their business and their relationship with Interim Management, and then I will start the questions on the panel. That what is the future of Interim Management and what's next in terms of Interim Management. So Marcos, can you start?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks, Rui. Thank you very much for IEM to invite us. It's a pleasure here to share this moment with you guys. I'm talking here from São Paulo, Brazil. Telos Transition is one of the pioneers here in the market. We made a rebrand of our company just 2 years ago during the pandemic, but Telos is present here since the early 90s of the last century. So we already have 15 to 20 years experience here in Brazil in interim management. Indeed, we serve here a whole spectrum of needs, of customer needs, starting from the very simple, let me say, temporary replacements, all the way up to business turnarounds and crisis management. We are part of the Globalized International Association, and we replicate here the same methodologies, and we use the same tools as everyone else in the globalized network.
Thank you.
So it's really a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. Maurizio, can you share your background as well, please?
Yeah, I mean, I'm operating in the interim management business since 2003. In 2004, I have been one of the 4 founders of Senior Manager Worldwide, the international group that today has quite a very wide span, going from US to Australia. But I have also always had quite some important roles in the association field. In 1993, I've been one of the co-founders of the first Italian Interim Management Association, and that's where we gave the name in Italy of temporary management. We call temporary rather than interim. I've been for a few years the board advisor of the second association, was Italian Leading Network, and since 2005, I am representing, I have a very nice, fantastic collaboration with Tony Evans with the Institute of Interim Management, because we represent, we are the Italian chapter, and under this brand we organize quite a lot of seminars, convention, congress, dedicated mainly to small, medium enterprise. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Pio.
Hi, Rui. Hello to everybody. Nice to stay physically here. That it's something that we are going to normality. As Ruth said, I am the president of the Spanish Interim Management Association. We launched the association 10 years ago. I also a partner of a provider that is called Servitalent. Well, I have a vision not only of a provider but also of our association in Spain about this activity. And I'm happy to talk about interim and not football today. So it's better to talk about.
We didn't say anything. We didn't say anything.
I prefer to say it just in case.
Okay. Changing subject. So back to interim management. One of the things that we've witnessed in this presentation, in these presentations, was actually the macro changes that are happening in the market. So I think it would be great for everyone to have a perspective from what's going on in Brazil, what's going on in Italy, Europe, and what's going on in Spain, so that we get this global perspective of the interim management market. So maybe Maurizio, can you start now?
Yeah, I mean, there are many, let's say, major trends or major facts that are impacting on the interim management market. Probably the biggest one in Europe, and I'm speaking only for Italy, is the huge amount of money that will come from Europe. In Italy, we call PNRR, National Plan for Resilience and Resistance, in order to support the economy and the enterprises after the pandemic. So this is very important because a lot of money will come, a lot of projects has to be done. And on the other side, the point is that in Italy, 50% of the big companies are not ready to prepare projects to get the money, and 80% of the small medium enterprises are not ready to prepare projects to get the money from Europe. So this is a very huge potential also for interim management, because the companies, especially small medium enterprises, they don't have the human resources, the managerial resources to get this money. Very simple. So if they want to get the money, they need to make projects, and if they want to make projects, they need manager. And they don't have it, and the best solution, this is something we are pushing today quite a lot. We also made quite a significant conference in Bologna in last week. The best way is to get to interim management. So this is one of the first major changes. The second, especially regarding the manufacturing companies, is there is a global redesign from the major OEMs of the global supply chains. They are moving toward the concept of inclusive manufacturing, trying to get more and more involved in the chain, the small medium enterprises that constitute the chain. And so they are paying a lot of attention to their development, maybe sometime also helping them in creating a long-term sustainability. Another implication from this inclusive manufacturing is that the new chains will be much more and more sustainable. And this means that especially small medium enterprises operating in the big manufacturing chain had to be sustainable. And what will happen, what is already happening, is that the sustainability is moving from a pure marketing concept. I mean, many companies are doing, I say, I'm sustainable, we are investing in sustainability. It's much more a kind of marketing investment. What is happening is that from marketing concept is getting a real competitive advantage concept. So that means that sustainability will be an important part of development also for small medium enterprises. Also considering that banks have already started and will more and more consider a sustainability of a small medium enterprise a good element to give them fund. That's two of the major trends that I see today in Italy, but also in let's say at the global scale.
Great. Marcos, is this counter-cyclical in Brazil?
Rui?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but somebody put me
I
on
can
mute.
hear you, Maurizio, but
What's going on here?
maybe we lost them.
No, I'm here.
No.
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
Have you heard
Don't worry.
my speech?
Somebody put me on mute, but that's okay. This is the.
Okay.
Listen, if you keep playing with this, I'm going to have to tap dance, so don't do this. Okay. So, Marcos, the question was, is Brazil experiencing a counter-cyclical moment in relation to, say, Europe and the US, or not? Or is it just fake news?
No, it is indeed. It is indeed. Well, I would not say a counter-cyclical, but we are not going to experience a recession. We have a good forecast for GDP growth, at least 1 to 1.5% next year. This year we are growing 3%. We're going to have a change of government, and as Maurizio was explaining, we are seeing already some foreign investment flowing to Brazil due to the rearrangement of the supply chains. And we are not just talking about, East European conflict, but also some risky areas that we see also in the extreme East, like the South Sea problem with China and Taiwan and everything that probably will come. So Brazil is profiting from this, and also from, I would say, the green industrialization. Turning every industry green, it's gonna be a huge wave. After COP27, we have seen what it is represents, and probably more than I that Brazil is a commodity-based exporter. Brazil has the environment, let me say, problems that we have seen in the former years, but we are certain that the new legislation will attack these problems, and we're going to present ourselves in a better shape for the future investments. So this is the first good news. The second thing is we are suffering the same as everybody, like major changes in consumer options. Everybody's going green. Millennials are bringing a new mindset to the world. ESG is absolutely mandatory. And above all, I would say there is a need, and that's impact for interim management. There is a need for ambidextrous management. So we need to look short-term and long-term at the very same time. This is something that we are facing here.
Great. Pio, what are the news coming from Spain other than football?
Well, the good news in the other part are, well, that things are not as bad as we were thinking about. It said that after the summer, the situation will be very difficult, and it's not true as deep as this world. I mean that things are moving. Companies are trying to improve their operations, their procedures, and they want to grow, not only in Spain but also in other countries. So what we're seeing that what companies demand, it's that they need to change quickly. First of all, they realize that they have to change. That's the first thing that they have to do. And the other thing is Spain is a country with a lot of small and medium companies. We have a small part of big companies. And many of them have to professionalize, and they know it. So they are starting to do it, and they need to do it from the head, the general managers, but also in different departments that are core for their business.
Okay. Marcos, you mentioned ESG, and to a certain extent, we're seeing ESG regulation coming in, especially the EU, what it's called the CSRD compliance directive, as well as some companies are changing their ESG policies. how do you see the potential use of interim managers in the area of ESG?
Rui, we are already seeing companies looking for interim managers with some, I would say, at least some ESG experience or background knowledge. So we are already deploying these to our customers here in terms of consulting services, but also in terms of interim positions. So it's really a booming market, and it's a tremendous opportunity. I would recommend everybody to have at least a minimum, let me say, education in ESG. No matter what function you have, you are a financial guy, you have to know the integrated reports, you need to know about TCFD, about materiality. If you are operations guy, you need to discuss scope 1, scope 2 emissions. That is no way out. If you do not know these things, you're going to be out of the game. It's mandatory, and I would say every provider of interim managers and every person that is acting as interim needs to get education about this, needs to get prepared for this. It's going to be a key decision factor for the upcoming projects. I'm certain about that.
Okay. Maurizio, do you share the same perspective in the case of Italy, or do you see as ESG?
Yeah. As I said before, this pressure exists especially for, the big ones, the big companies, have the human and managerial resources to manage. They have also the financial resources to manage. The point is in an economy which is characterized like Italy by 95% of small, medium enterprise, it's for this type of sector. Because there is a double type of pressure. One is coming from, especially from the manufacturing companies, from the process of inclusive manufacturing that I mentioned before. So the big OEMs are requesting more and more that their chains will become sustainable in the long term, and so the small medium enterprise have to comply with that. And the second point, the second pressure is coming from the banks. Banks are requesting more and more sustainability plans for small medium enterprise to give them money, lending, etc., etc. So that it's a kind of there is no alternative in practice. And if you want to do it, and if you don't have the resources, like is the typical case of small medium enterprise, you have only interim to access.
The other question that I don't know if you'd like to share some thoughts on ESG.
No, it's the same in Spain. Perhaps the thing is that it's true that it's something that it's perhaps more focused on big companies, not as much as small and medium. But the small and medium that works for big companies or for the governments, they have to do something, and they are start thinking about some strategies about this thing.
Okay, so let's move on to more of a client interim management relationship questions. Clients are getting, or companies overall are getting concerned with the coming times of recession, and we've had a very stark presentation from Tony about what are the trends and how they will affect the economy. Would you recommend a client, what kind of recommendations would you give a client, Maurizio, what kind of recommendations would you give a client that wants to use interim management in times of recession?
The point is not recession or not recession. The point, again, is especially for small medium enterprise, is they must learn, and they are still learning, how to use properly interim management. That's the point. Because even if it's for a positive project, for an expansion or whatever, even if it's for a negative project, which is a turnaround, a special situation, the major point is about the conditions, the preconditions to for the success of a project. What I'm always insisting with a small type of client, and especially with familiar business, is that if you don't have the consensus of all the operational shareholders in a small companies, there's no way you can succeed in a project. First, and the second thing is that entrepreneurs and families must understand that a manager without the proper powers to translate plans in action, I mean, it's useless. That's the point. And there's still a long way to go. I mean, what we have done many surveys in Italy, and we have discovered that the number of small medium enterprise using interim is increasing. The number of small medium enterprise knowing intermediate is increasing, has increased a lot in the past year. The point is this market is so huge, as I said before, 95% of the Italian economy, that there's still a lot of evangelization process to go. That's the point.
Yeah. Picking on the evangelization process, and I'd like to hear both Pio and Marcos on evangelizing, or is it feasible to address SMEs for a service that they are not aware, that SMEs are less aware than large corporations? And how do you evangelize the interim management business to SMEs? And this applies to Marcos as well.
Okay, should I go first?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Good. So, yeah, evangelization here is also an issue. Brazil, I would say it's not so mature for interim managers as Europe as a whole, but is more mature than other Latin American countries. We are having some activities in other countries here, and we are seeing that they are in a lower phase, so to say, understanding the capabilities and the advantages of interim management. But in Brazil, and I do share the same as Maurizio, we here have a huge amount of small and medium-sized companies, family-owned, that are getting to know interim as a solution, as an option, and we are taking advantage of this. We are being successful in reaching these companies through associations, through commercial chambers and all the things. So this is, and sometimes it's easier to reach them and to convince them, because all decisions are locally, than to go to a multinational subsidiary. Sometimes it's easier. We currently have 50-50, I would say, from our customer base in this respect. We have half of them local companies and half of them subsidiaries of multinationals. So evangelization is going on, is going fine. It's still a need, but we are being successful in this.
Great. Pio?
Well, here in Spain, with big companies is easier, because some of them knows about interim because of other countries that is more known. And by the other hand, with the medium and small companies, I think the key point is to talk about it. I mean, it's something that the main thing that is behind is the confidence. So the best way to talk about it is that one company that uses talks to another company that they use it and it works. Because it's the best way that to know it. Anyway, we can do conference, and it's important that people who is interim to identify with this activity, and because they are not consultants, they are not advisors, they are interims. So you must say that you are interim and you are working as an interim, and it's important to talk about also with all of you that this is your activity.
Oh, great.
Rui, may I add something about our experience in that?
Yes.
As I said, I had many, in the past, many roles, and still I having in the institutional side. During the past 2 years, starting in 2020, we have started a kind of roadshow. It's literally a roadshow that has touched 8 different regions in Italy. We developed that using the name of IIM, so I was one of the co-organizers, and together with the Association of the CFOs and HR directors, we have started this roadshow We have been in 8 places, 8 different regions in Italy, from the north, I mean from Milan to the deep south in Sicily, in Naples, etc. And in all these events we have been able to call universities, business school, representative of entrepreneurial association, which is quite important, and banks. With all this panel of people, etc., we've been able to attract a lot of entrepreneurs that have started to know interim, to understand the values, especially in function that they don't know, because in many cases the entrepreneurs, they are quite willing to use interim for operations, for internationalization, for sales, because they know, they understand, and they know the immediate economic advantage. But in other cases, like in HR and CFOs, they don't understand it. And so it has been a very good way to promote interim in the small, medium enterprise. And also important is after each event, we use quite a long wave in the press, because, for instance, we had the last one, we did it on the 28th in Bologna, in Emilia-Romagna, which is quite a very rich region in the north of Italy. And after that, we have already started a long, let's say, press wave. We have already had 4 press coverage on the national press, and now we move on the local press. That's quite important.
Great.
I mean, it's an experience. It's very positive from our side. I mean, it's something that maybe can be replicated in other countries.
Okay, we're heading towards the last 10 minutes of the panel, so I'll open questions to the audience. But if the audience is very shy, I will continue with the questions. Maurizio, this audience is very shy.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So, Yes, Marcos. Marcos is listening.
We are having a new political power in Brazil in more or less 3-4 weeks. What do you think that are going to be the external and the internal conditions in terms of the environment for the companies doing business in Brazil? Do you think that the work that have been done during the last years and that is considered by most of the entrepreneurs and the people that act in the business is positive will go on, or do you think that there will be a change on that? Second, what do you think that is the role of Portugal in this new experience?
Okay, thanks for the question. Well, we are living moments of uncertainty because, you know, the first line of management of the new government is not nominated. We are not sure about, for instance, finance minister, and this is decisive for any, you know, path that the new government is going to take. But we know that we're going to have challenges because there is a discussion about, you know, the former term of the new elected president was very, let me say, difficult one, and a lot of uncertainty. We know that in respect to agribusiness, he is not the most aligned person, and so the entrepreneurs are scary. But what I think it's, let me say, it's a counterweight to this, and what could put us on the right track is the global tendency of, you know, seeing Brazil with more respect, seeing Brazil more in the terms of protecting the environment, and making some bets that we have capacities and we have capabilities to deploy to the world the current shortage on commodities and also on the green energy that is going to coming. So we do believe that despite the uncertainty, there's going to be positive, let me say, short-term outcomes. And what the new government needs to do is also to contain their, let me say, their very ambitious goals to transform the state and to stop some reforms that we are really good in terms of labor reform and also social security reform. This needs to continue. The economy cannot support further deficits and they gotta be aware of this. So huge expectations for the nominations of the first line of management. And Portugal and all the others, we are already talking here with companies needing to invest and willing to invest in Brazil. We also talking with Dutch companies, with all others. So there is a wave coming. People talks about $1 to $4 trillion of new investments, foreign direct investments coming to Brazil in the next 5 years. So this is a huge thing, and we got to be prepared for that. We do believe that there is a good chance that we move forward real fast.
I'll use that.
Rui.
Yes.
May I add one thing? I mean, about the major trends that I didn't cover before. There are at least 3 other elements that we are considering that can be a good potential for interim management. First of all, is the major changes going on in the third sector, non-governmental organizations, because you know that there is an increasing pressure from the donors, from the people that are financing this organization, to have much more accountability, etc. And that's what we discovered in May. We already made at international level many projects. They need interim management to have people that can be the front man for donors, for banking, etc. First. The second thing is the growing importance for Africa. We are already starting to move to understand how to move in Africa, because in Africa there is a huge potential for growing the local economy and for growing small, medium enterprises, and not only them, also big enterprises in Africa. And the third thing that we notice is going on is that a global redesign of the international trade. You know, with the war, political answer, all this is changing. Many companies, especially mid companies, are trying to find their way, let's say, in the new international scenario. And in this case, what is important is that they can use it. They start learning how to use local managers. I mean, which is something we can do. Globalize also can do. I mean, you can do not only that with a national export manager, but now if you move international, you can do with a Portuguese in Portugal, with a Chinese in China, with a Canadian in Canada. That's the 3 other trends that we saw as quite important during these days.
Yes, and picking on that last statement, I'd like to hear you out on what kind of, I don't want to say advice, but what kind of recommendations would you give for expat interim managers? So someone not from Italy coming to Italy and perform an interim management assignment, or someone not from Brazil going to Brazil and doing the assignment, or in the case of Spain. So maybe I'll start now with Pio.
Well, I think the most important thing is that that there is only one market. I mean, and the key point is the expertise and the experience you have that must have some differences. I mean, what companies have a need, and they need a person that have a similar experience in the need they have. They doesn't matter if it's in one country or in another country. The key point is the experience and the add value that they can give to these to these needs. And I say to everybody that they must think globally. In this activity, you don't have to think that you are going to find your opportunity beside your house, but not only in your country. You must, in our case, for example, LATAM is a very big market, and some Spanish people are going there to professionalize some companies, and it's a good market for Spanish people, for example.
Okay. Maurizio, would you like to share some insights?
My strong belief, I mean, which is let's say proved by the market, is that the best solution to move on international is to use local managers. I mean, we never used expats because in general people are coming to us just because they know we are covering a lot of countries and they want to have a local manager. It happens only, very, very rarely that companies are asking us for an Italian to be sent outside. Because expats are expensive, and in general terms, they don't know the habits in a country, the law, sometimes the language, etc. So local manager is something that we are pushing and that the market is accepting more and more, especially the small medium enterprise. The multinational is quite logical, but also the small medium enterprise, they are, let's say, buying this concept more and more.
Great. Marcos?
Yeah, this is a great question for us because, Rui, as you certainly know, Brazil is a mixture of cultures, is a very well mixed country, and we really welcome here expats. We have a lot of them. We use a lot of interim managers in our projects that are not only based here, but also remotely from abroad. I just have 2 recommendations. So first one, be prepared for negotiate a lot, because we have a culture that needs consensus and do not like, autocratic decisions from whatever. So we have to negotiate better. Second thing, be prepared for lower rates, because we do not have the same acquisition power. We pay very well, I would say, for interims as well, especially multinationals, but I would say maybe 15-20% less than normal European fee. But on the other side, you're going to spend much less as well. Here, the living standards are fine with lower rates as well. So, but first thing, capacity to adapt, understand that you have to negotiate, and on the other side, you have some freedom as well to be yourself, to exercise whatever you want, to express yourself, and to be authentic. So we are fine with expats no matter what.
Great. I think I'm going to negotiate with the audience the end of this panel. I'm going to give them the freedom to express themselves. I don't know if they're going to do it or not. So any questions from the audience? Because this is an opportunity. We're talking with someone from Italy, someone from Spain, someone from Brazil. It's a unique opportunity to actually put your questions, your ideas, your insights, challenge these people that have so kindly come and sit with us. So freedom to express yourselves. Marcos, they are very tímidos.
Eu sei.
Okay.
Extravasaram tudo ontem, depois do 6-1.
Okay, one last question. What would you give? What would be the advice for someone that is coming into the market, for an interim manager that is coming into the market? And I would ask you to give like a short, punchy one. Okay, Marcos, you can start now, please.
For someone who wants to act as interim,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Okay. So I would say we think about interims as very senior guys. Most of us are baby boomers, right? And what we are facing now in the companies are millennials, Generation Z, and a whole mixture of things. So be prepared to, your soft skills are tremendous value. Technicalities, we know that you have been exercising them. You have experience, maturity, good, decision-making process. That's we take for granted. If you are interim management, that's the basic needs. It's mandatory. But do take a look on your soft skills, because what you're facing in the customers currently, it's a whole mixture of new mindsets, new thoughts, and it's a new culture. So do not come without capability to adapt, flexibility to understand this new environment. That's the main point. We are losing interims And sometimes customers are demanding us to change people because they are not very good at soft skills. They are all very good technical guys, but not very good in soft skills. So prepare this, please.
Thank you. Pio?
Well, for me, the most important thing is to define in which situations are you good. Are you good enough and you add value to a company?
It's not until you fall back.
It's not only a question of a knowledge in an area, but also it's a knowledge about some situations that you have lived and how can you help to a company to solve this situation to help them.
Great. Famous last words for Maurizio Quarta.
It's very simple. I'm starting from an objective consideration. Most of the managers moving from permanent to interim and leaving the transition are coming from big companies, big culture, big organization. The huge potential market is in the small, medium enterprises. So what is important are the soft skills that Marcos has mentioned, but basically not only that, the capability of relating, of entertaining a relation or creating a relation with the entrepreneur, with the family, which is totally different from working in a big organization. That's I think the major point. And the second point also is important related to that is in smaller organization, I mean, to be really hands-on. You cannot think like in a big organization that you have a 4 level of people that are working for you, etc. You have to do it by yourself. And this is, I think, one of the most critical point for many managers. They are very good, maybe they are very good at soft skill, but they are paying a lot of difficulties when they have to really to put their hands in the mud and do something. That's my recommendation.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you to give a warm hand of applause to the President. So we move quickly to the next panel. With this, we'll have Dirk and Nuno. Também. Gracias. This will be. Oh, yeah. There's aí, teu. Acho que está. Está. Vê se está ligado. Não está ligado. Ligado? Deixa-me só ligar então. Já dá? Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, now that I've done some tech support, multitasking, exactly. Again, 2 more renowned panelists, one from Portugal, one from, actually originally from Holland or the Netherlands, and but staying in Spain, right? Living in Spain.
Living in Spain, yes.
Maybe you'd like to share with us a little bit that experience, because it's quite interesting to make it, I don't want to call it big, but make it well in Spain, coming from Holland, and that experience should be good of insights for the audience.
Yes, it is because I was thinking about it when we're talking about expats. We at QMT work already 20 years in the interim management market, and we try not to work with expats. And that is a foreigner who says it. Yeah, because in the end, we don't like to work with foreign interim managers. I myself am a foreigner, and how do we see that? Well, to work in a different culture, you have to live there. You have to live there long. Yeah, we have here also another Dutchman. And in order to understand where you are working, we are talking about, you know what to do, the hard skills, the soft skills. We talk about the different generations, etc. But you also have to take into account the culture of the country where you are living, how things are done, how people treat each other, how organizations are run. And if you are not aware of that, then you can run very fast in trouble. I myself am living now 40 years in Spain. I came to Spain to do my MBA at the IESE, and I decided that I wanted to leave afterwards. And I had already a job offer in the UK for a Spanish company. So I signed the contract, went to the Netherlands to organize my things at home. And when I came back, first day at the company, they said they were closing down the UK operation, and they offered me to stay in Spain. So you can organize everything very well, but in the end things happen that you are not aware of, and that is things that you cannot control. That is also something you see in interim management assignments, but we can talk about that later on. So that is, I said, well, you know, I have to give it a try, why not? Otherwise I'm here on the street, and well then. And after a year I changed company, and then in 2001 I left the company where I was working. I was the board of a company that was listed on the stock market, and I wanted to do something different, and I started QMT. And I had always and from that moment on I had a clear idea. I wanted to make interim management successful in Spain. I'm one of the pioneers. Someone started earlier, some people started more or less at the same time. And after 20 years, I'm still living off it, so it has gone quite well. I can't complain.
Okay, so managing a subsidiary of a Dutch company and actually understanding that I'm sure you've had candidates that were expats. Yes. And even Portuguese candidates that become expats abroad. What is your perspective on the expat experience? And maybe you can start by giving us a little bit of a perspective of the interim management from Randstad's perspective.
Okay. So, talking about interim management in Portugal, to be honest, at the moment, it's still a bit above the level of non-existent. And sorry to begin like this, but we are trying to push that business in Portugal. We are dedicated, as you might know, to recruitment, middle management, top management, also the blue-collar level. We do development, we do consultancy, so we do a ton of things. But we are trying still to get a broader portfolio on the market. And the demand that we get from clients regarding interim management is not interim management as we saw during all the presentations. There are exceptions, obviously, but the vast majority of the requests are something like, I do not have the headcount, I'm in hire freeze, I just fired someone and I need to replace him, but not with the same job role and not on my own payroll. So can you please help me to find qualified people to join the company in your payroll, in Randstad's payroll, and do the job. And then let's see if he will or not join the company in the future. So this is a bit what interim management looks like, at least from our perspective, in 90% of the cases. Obviously, we work with the vast broad of clients. We work with the biggest companies in Portugal, all that are stock on the stock exchange list, but also with the small and medium business across the country. And what we see there is that there's a need, obviously, urgent need, to be honest, to have experienced professionals to manage the company. Sometimes it can be turnaround, can be the daily management of the company. It can be something regarding, I'm going to launch a product, a service, whatever, and I need those type of help. But we are not still there regarding the mentality of the business owners of the companies. So I think there's a lot to be done. I think we need to move on that direction. But at the moment, December 2022, we are not there yet. That's also comparable if you look at the usage of temporary work in Portugal and you compare it to the other countries, especially with the Nordic countries. You see that in countries like the Netherlands, and we are Dutch, as you refer, the usage of temp work is by the roof. 50% of the employment there is done by temp work. Can be qualified or not, but it's done by temp work. In Portugal, that percentage is so small when you do the comparison between the countries.
Great. Do you think that there's actually an assassination of the interim management concept by associating it with temps?
Yes, definitely.
Because this has been a move from some international companies, and it wasn't Randstad, but some international companies that actually put the label interim, and they were actually doing temp instead of doing really interim.
If you want to go into detail, and we can go into detail there, and the tag is there, interim management. And then you have, depending on the size of the company, also the mentality of the mindset of the company, you will have a team dedicated to that or not. And what we see on the market is that sometimes what they do is that they approach some clients and they tell them, why are you going to hire this guy directly to your own payroll and not have him on our payroll for 2 years, and then you can try him out. And if anything goes wrong, then you can get rid of him and so on. So I think that's clearly one of the main problems, is that we are talking about interim management as a whole. So it's temp work, it's replacing someone, it's everything, and it's also obviously interim management per se. But on the vast majority of the cases, it's not interim management. It's something else completely different.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that even though the Netherlands were the, let's call it, the birth of the interim management concept in the 70s with the oil crisis, it was very clear from the onset in the Netherlands that temp is one thing, interim management is another thing, which is completely different, and companies that are actually mixing these concepts are actually doing a disfavor to both of the industries.
And let me add on this, that's happening on the client side, on the company side, but that's also happening on the candidate side. And sometimes people say, I want to be in interim management professional, but I have no idea what this really means. So sometimes what this means is that they want to work on a specific project and so on, but sometimes it's option B, option C, D, E, and so on. It's not a vocation, if you want, something that they really want to do, and the vast majority of cases, they don't have no idea what does it mean.
So what?
The same we see in Spain, where people mix up everything. Interim is used for people who are part-time with clients or with companies, but on a very long-term basis, a couple of years. And they work then with several clients at the same time, but 4 or 5 years with them. So there is no interim. Interim is also used for secretaries. It is used for bookkeepers. But the way we use it as interim is a manager who comes into a company to change things, to bring the company or the area of the company from A to B. That is only a part. And it is also, it's being messed up as well by the companies, as well by the providers, or people who say, no, you take somebody on trial and we use that as interim. Yeah, that is no interim. That only harms the definition of interim management. And I would say, well, you know, everything you do is fine, but don't call it all interim management. Use another word for it.
What would you recommend to have this mindset change? Because there's a clear need of mindset change in terms of how candidates see interim management, how clients see interim management, and how this mix-up of concepts that actually is not helping the market to establish itself as mature as, for instance, the markets in the Nordics, in Holland, in the Netherlands, and UK, Germany, France, what we would call evolved markets.
Well, I would say there are two things. Temp and interim is mixed up, also in those markets. Yeah, but then you use other formulas like part-time with clients or with multi-client. That is not temp. Then just say you are a freelancer who works with multiple clients. Yeah, give it the name it is. Don't try to put everything under the same label. I think that is the best way. Also for yourself to brand yourself. Yeah, as a provider, as an interim manager, and as a client. I would say don't try to mix up everything, because for you, when you have to give account to what you have done, yeah, you say, well, we have an interim manager. Yes, but he is now already 6 years here. Then he isn't an interim manager anymore. Or when he has 3 years here, that is no interim management. That is just another type of way of working. And we see that the labor market and the way companies are working and contracting the people is different at the moment. Yeah, and that is normal, because the needs of the companies are different from 40, 50 years ago. Then just give it the name it has to have, so that we are not mixing up things and that we are not devaluating some very important concepts.
Nuno, would you like to comment on this?
I think that the biggest problem is the lack of knowledge of the concept itself. Yeah. So if you tell someone to the market, do you want to work to a candidate, do you want to work on an interim management basis, or do you want to be an interim manager? I think that the vast majority of candidates has no idea of what this means. It means. It's the same if you approach companies. Have you ever used an interim management and so on? So I think the first part of to try to solve the problem is to define the concept, and then to communicate it to the market, and hopefully if you could have proof of concept, that would also quite help the solution. But again, it must be through communication now and approaching the market with the correct definition of what's interim management and what's the purpose of interim management.
Okay. Would you like to share some of the experiences of Randstad's interim management in Holland that are so different from the Portuguese?
It's clearly different. We are also the market leader in Portugal, but in the Netherlands by far. And the thing is that companies use us for so many things that interim management is just one more. And the percentage, if you look at the total revenue of the company, it's about 10%. So it's not really on the main agenda, if you want. But what we do there is that we have the teams that are running the executive search business, doing and approaching the interim management part. Aside of the white collar recruitment can be done by temp or through permanent recruitment, but we have a dedicated teams to approach interim management. But again, it's an add-on to the executive search business.
Dirk, there was some in the previous panel, and there was a question actually from a gentleman that is still sitting here about the certification of the interim management role. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit on what would be what is Spain's experience? What has been Spain's experience in terms of making this a more stable market? And what would be your your, let's call it 50 cents in terms of how to make this a role that is recognized in the market?
Okay, well, those are three questions you asked. In the first place, certification. Personally, I do not see a necessity for a certification. We are now already 20 years in the market. We are working with very good interim managers. Many of them repeat, and we are very satisfied with their performance. And none of them has a certification. Yeah? It is very difficult to certify the knowledge, the way of management of somebody, and his capabilities, because it is not only the technical side that you have to have, but it is also your soft skills, as has been outlined before. Yeah? Soft skills are very important. For us, interim management is always about change, and change is not only that you know what to do on the technical side, and because that is easy, but then how do you get a team, a big group of people changing completely the way they are doing things and getting into the new path? And that is something you cannot certify. Somebody has it or just has it not. Yeah. So and that is what is interim management about. And then what am I going to certify? Look, interim management, for instance, on the finance side, the CFO, you can have CFOs who are very good in reporting and in getting that in order for multinational companies. Others are very good in reorganizing the balance sheet. So what I'm going to certify, who is good in what? Yeah, so we have, I don't know how many certifications. So it is very difficult. And I also, for instance, my sister, she's an interim management, I'm an interim manager in the Netherlands. She is very sought after in the healthcare business, and she has no certification at all, but she's really good. And usually when she finishes an assignment, she has 2 or 3 others lined up for her, and she can choose. So no certification needed. What was the other 2 things you asked? Because I'm
sorry, can I just add on this? Yeah. I think that the problem that Paul tried to ask was if there's a certification for the interim management. So is it a bulletproof professional or not? And the thing is, it's impossible to certify people. We cannot put a Randstad stamp on someone and tell him, this is a good professional, this is a good CFO or a good CEO or so on. So it's impossible to certify because, and again, if someone can have an excellent track record in doing something, then move to another project and it's going to be a disaster by the conditions have changed, a different company, a different country and so on. So certification by itself, I don't think it's doable.
No. Yeah, and also somebody who fits in with one client cannot fit in with the same client doing the same assignment, the same type of assignment. So it is very difficult. And then how can your other question was how can we make this a more, how shall I say, stable profession? Well, that is something that will take a lot of time. We are now 20 years in Spain. We are, I think, 17, 18 years ahead of you. And we are far way off from France or from Italy. Yeah? And I think we will never catch up with them. So interim management in Spain will always be a small business. Yeah? Interim managers who make a living, there are quite of them, and who make a quite good living, there are quite of them, but they work with companies as ours. They have an extensive network themselves to find clients. Yeah? So it's a lot of work you have to do yourself to become a stable interim manager. And that is when somebody says, okay, what do I have to do to become interim manager? I give him a whole list of things to do. And the first thing is, do you really want to do it? And can you sustain times in which you have financial and also emotional because of that, emotional instability. I mean, financial instability can lead to emotional instability. If you can handle financial instability, yes, then become an interim manager. And one of the most important things is to make your USP, and what are you good, and then your commercial activities. Don't sit next to the phone waiting until somebody calls you. It will never happen. Yeah, it will not happen when you're not out on the market to sell yourself.
Very good. I don't want to get this audience depressed, so let me ask you something on the positive side, which is how do you, we understand that the Portuguese market, and I've been 20 years now into the interim management, and as you said, it is a marginal market in relation to temporary work or any other forms of professional services. But in terms of what would be the positive recommendations to make this market a bigger market or a more recognized market, even though that it's a limited market?
Okay, it's a limited market, but what we have done is a lot of publication, a lot of communication. In the last 2 years, the market really has taken off. Yeah? We have seen a huge increase thanks to COVID. Suddenly, mindsets of people started to change. And that also the attitude towards interim management. Yeah? So when COVID started, we had on the 15th of March lockdown. 15th of April, half of the assignments were cancelled. No, at the end of March, and then on the 25th of April, things started to boom, and we did the best year ever until then. Yeah, people were working from remote, and it worked fantastically good. 21 was also a very good year. 22 is even a better year. It will be the best year of our existence, and we see that the market is really taking off at the moment. So that will happen here probably also at one point in time. But there has to be something that is a tipping point. And for us, it was the combination of a lot of publications, effort, communication, etc., etc., etc. Something that disrupted everything, and that people had to start to do something. And we have these issues, we have these problems, let's try and interim manage, and things worked out very well.
Yeah. But again, I think that the job market landscape is also changing a lot. It's including obviously the interim management part, but the discussions and the effects of things like the great resignation, the quiet quitting, the gig economy, 4 days a week, people deciding to change a bit the way that they are working and relating to a specific company, is changing a bit the way that talent, can be through interim management, can be whatever, with companies are now connecting and relating. So I think there's going to be a huge change over the next years. It's not going to be very fast, so it's not going to change completely and dramatically on the short term, but on the medium, long term, I think when you look at the company and to the workforce, you see that you have gig economy, hybrid working, interim management, but obviously the vast majority will still be an employee working to a specific company. But the model is now changing a lot.
Yeah. This leads to another question which relates to what you're mentioning, is that there is a vector that affects people in their attitude towards work.
Yep.
And this in turn will affect management styles as well as management practices. Do you see a change of management practices in the near future due to not just the points that you mentioned, but actually due to the coming times? And what do you foresee as those changes?
I think that with the economic landscape that we have now, with the scarcity of talent that we are also seeing, I think that the way that we are managing the people, the leadership style is also changing a bit. When the crisis began with the pandemic, obviously the vast majority of companies went a bit more autocratic directive. We are going to do this. And people really appreciate it because in a time of uncertainty, they don't want to be heard because it was unprecedented regarding what's going on, what's going to happen on the near future. But I think that with the change that we are now seeing is that people are really at the center of the equation. And regarding also the leadership style that we are using, a quick example regarding Randstad, we try to implement something that we call the freedom in the frame, which is quite simple, quite basic. We can design a specific frame, and then the boundaries of the frame will be of two kinds. One will be the limits. So what line you cannot cross, can be compliance, can be risk, can be whatever. And then the other lines of the frame will be something regarding what are your targets, your objectives, your goals. So we need to reach this, but you cannot cross these specific boundaries or lines. But inside the frame, the way that managers organize their teams, the way that people decide how they work, how they approach work, how they organize themselves, they have a level of autonomy which is a bit, I think, unprecedented if you look prior to the pandemic. And we are trying to do this. This means obviously that people are not in the office, at least full time. They can be 1 day, 2 days, depending on company's office. So the level of responsibility, of confidence regarding the teams is also increasing. There's also a change coming from task-oriented. So the manager was there seeing if the team was performing the task on a daily basis and so on, to a model in which the manager is not there, the employee is not also there, and they have no idea of what this person is doing. Can be working, can be shopping, right? But the most important thing is what's the outcome. So it's more coming from task-oriented, to outcome-oriented. I think that's the bigger change that you see. And just to finish, another detail is how we are going to manage the company. Are you going to focus on the short term, the medium term, or the long term? Ideally, obviously, you focus a lot on the short term because you need to reach your targets, your budget, and so on, to have the tools that enable everything else. But you also need to pay attention to the medium and long term regarding the sustainability of the company and how much can you innovate and differentiate yourself from the competitors. So this balance, I think, is also changing a bit on the job market at the moment.
Great. Another question that relates not just to management practices, it relates to generational gap. Because the way we're witnessing is that in the past there has always been a generation gap, but it seems now that the generation gap is increasing further and further. Not just because you have more generations working, from Gen Z to baby boomers and so on, but the fact that there's a massive gap between these multiple generations in the workplace. What is your perspective on senior management? I don't want to even call it interim managers after the discussion that we had.
Yeah.
But on senior managers that have the ability to gather around multiple generations, and what kind of skills would you recommend to invest on, especially soft skills?
Well, this is the same question as you say, how many markets are you attacking? Yeah, because it is something that is there and you have to adapt to it. So you have to really adapt to all these different generations. It has to do a lot with soft skills, has to be a lot of listen a lot, involve the people in what you are doing, communicate a lot with the people. Yeah, and then we see, because we work especially with big companies, and we see that all these companies, they have their programs, they have their way of working with young people, with different generations, because if you don't do it, they want to leave. Yeah, people are not, how shall I say, people, it takes them more time and more effort to get involved with a company. They want to get involved, but if they see they are not getting involved with a company, they look for something else. So you really have to work on what perspective can I offer them? How can I work with them? How can I get them into what the company needs from them, so that we also give something to them that they feel realized by our company and that they can relate to the company also. So it is, you have to do more selling inside, but not on the marketing side. You have to really to deliver, yeah? And that is something that is more and more important. People, you know, in Spain we have a little bit different than in other countries because we have still a huge unemployment. Among young people it is over 30%. So they have not so many places to go, but especially highly educated technical people, they go wherever they want. And if you want to retain them, then you have to adapt to their needs, to what they are looking for in the market. And if not, you're out. And as an and as a senior manager, you have to do the same, because otherwise you cannot work with your team. And then you lose your team and you lose yourself. And you are out also. So be very open to it. Don't think that what you say is what is the truth. Work with them, get them involved. You can get a lot out of these people also.
Great. Any thoughts on this?
I think that the thing is that if you look at the way that companies are now starting to organize, they are becoming less and less hierarchical. So we have the senior director, then the director, then the manager, then whatever, and so on, and they are becoming a bit more flat. So this means that you can have a good balance between also the generations at work. And if you are able to lead the team effectively, you are able to engage them and also to talk about development and what's in it for them. I think that obviously both layers, the more junior and the more senior, are critical to a company. The thing is that how you can get the most out of them while retaining them, engaging them, and also developing them. But that's a lot regarding leadership.
Okay. Yeah, maybe a last thing on that. We are now in the football season, so I would say see yourself more as a coach. And you have the defenders, you have the attackers, you have the midfield. Everybody has its place, everybody has different skills, everybody does something different. And don't try to be the guy who knows everything best.
Yeah.
You are the one who makes a strategy, who makes the lineup, and take care that it works. And let the others do the game. Let them do their work. They love it. Yeah? And when you let them do their work, they really love to work for the team. And it is less autocratic, and that is good, and you get much more out of the people in that way.
I like that. And because this is a panel about the future of management, and I think it's really important to talk about managerial styles, and especially with the transformation of technology and in what regards artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence adds a component of analytics and a component of massive changes and abrupt changes in the way that people operate. So people will operate more with a combination of people and machines, and people and bots, and people and virtual assistants. How do you see the changes of management styles in terms of this coming changes of technology?
I think you have three layers regarding artificial intelligence. You have the CSAT intelligence, which basically you have some data that's being organized and so on. Then you have augmented intelligence, in which you add to the data, you add all the machine learning and so on. It helps you to try to be a bit more predictable, detect the failures, errors, and so on. And then something in which you are not there yet is the full automation, which the vast majority of the process will be fully digitized. But I think that in Randstad we have a strategy for that. We call it Tech and Touch. And basically it's try to bring the best of our people to the process and being helped with the support of the IT. And what we see is that people are more productive, and they really focus in the parts of the process in which they add value. Just a quick example regarding recruitment, for instance. the added value of a consultant doing sourcing of CVs is quite low. So if you are able to teach the machine and the algorithm to do the search, then they can be dedicated to really to speak with people, with candidates, and so on. And that's where they add value. There's a learning process, obviously, but the future is that we are going to be more productive. We are going to focus on the tasks that are not tedious, and on the tasks in really where the human factor adds value on this.
Okay, well, about it, the artificial intelligence will help us to reduce all type of controlling, all type of administrative tasks, and it will give us much more time to be creative, to do things that machines cannot do, to organize, to it helps us to make better our judgment, and you will have to work like a designer. Yeah, you have to say, okay, I want to have this, that, and that, and that. And then also, yeah, I think you should work more on your social skills and on your network, because that is something that machines will never be able to do, and that is where you can beat them. And see it as your, how shall I say, formerly people had a secretary, now they have a personal assistant. See it as your personal assistant. Yeah, it is something that helps you to do a lot of tasks which are tedious, which do not need so much creativity, yeah, and it takes all the tedious tasks away from you, and you will work much more with your experience and with your expertise to judge things that the machines come up with. Yeah, we are in our company now implementing a new software which has a part of artificial intelligence to judge CVs. Yeah, so we're really making big steps forward in that, and it helps us to reduce time. Yeah, it helps us to reduce people who do jobs that are not, how shall I say, that do not add that much value, and then the machine does it for us. And but then in the end, we are the ones who take the decisions. Yeah? So the final decision they will not make, because there's so many issues that the machine cannot take into account, and you too. So it will reinforce the quality of your work. So I would say go for it as a manager. It is really a big step forward. Just as when you see on the shop floor, robotics is helping much more blue-collar workers. And I had a couple, not so long ago, I had a talk with a high-level Volkswagen executive. They said they were teaching their workers to work together with robots. Yeah, it's not that robots took away their job. No, they teach them to work with them, to be more efficient, to be more secure, to be with less danger, etc. So yeah, these things are there to make their work easier and better.
Okay, and as we're heading towards the end of the panel, again, I'm going to ask the audience to talk. This is, I guess, we have a microphone ready, but how do you say shy in Dutch?
Verlegen, yeah.
Verlegen.
Yeah, you don't have to be shy, huh?
Any questions? Good.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts and vision. Let's suppose there is someone in the audience today that took half a day off to be here and is thinking about starting as an interim management, he or she. How do you convince him, or what arguments do you from Randstad and your company, Dirk, how do you see that he walks away, or he or she walks away with enough information to take a decision that I'm going to do interim management or not?
I think it's
given, sorry to interrupt, given, a bit the realities that Dirk mentioned, because there are a lot of realities like financial instability, you have to dare to leave your job and take a step forward and things like that.
I think it's at Randstad we try to advise all candidates on this. Interim management is a bit like if you want to start your own business, like the startup environment. We know that a lot of people want to do it. We also know that they normally fail, right? So you know that 5% or less of startups can make it on the medium term, not even discussing on the long term. I think that's that we need to connect that, your intention of becoming an interim management, with your employability rate. So how attractive are you to the market? What skills, experience, and track record do you have that's going to separate you from the vast majority of the market? Because you need to add value, right? It's going to be a different solution proposed to a specific client and so on. So it needs to be obvious that we are going to add value to a specific company, client, sector, whatever. But on the vast majority of cases, that doesn't happen. So that's why it's only for the brave few that are able to do it, right? So but again, I think a really concrete assessment needs to be done if you can do it and if you want to do it. Again, I think that's the biggest part of the equation.
Okay, what I always say to people, look, I'm not here to convince you to become an interim manager if you are not one. But the people we work with, they love it once they've tried it, because it gives you a certain amount of freedom. Also in the company, the assignments usually have a priority and they give you a lot of possibilities to succeed and a lot of resources to succeed. And if you want to become one first, you do not need to be strapped for cash. Yeah, if you have a lot of financial obligations and you have not a partner who can cover most of it or a big part of it, then think about it. But when you say, okay, I'm going to do it, then do the following. First, define your USP, your unique selling proposition, and do that with 3 questions. First, what have you done in your career? In what are you very good? Because that is what makes you interesting for possible clients. And 3, what do you really like to do? Yeah? What are you good and what are you at and what do you like? It's very important, because if you like to do something which you are very good, then you will do it in a very good way. A client never makes a, how shall I say, a job description. They tell you what is happening to them, in which situation they are, and what needs to be solved. And if that is your area of expertise, then you are the right candidate for that assignment. So you're not a candidate for every assignment in your functional area, but for certain assignments. So it's very important that you decide what are you really good at. And then you have to make a list of people you know, contacts you have, people you know in providers like us, but also people you know in companies. And you have to start to contact them. Yeah? Your network is very important. And when you do that, you see that you will end up having clients. And then you go from one client to the other. I see the people who really do this with a real dedication in Spain. They go from one client to the other. Some assignments they like more, some assignments they like less, but I think they are usually working 10 out of 12 months. Yeah. So there is a market, but not everybody approaches it in the right way, as well from its message, as well from the sales side. Yeah? And you really have to, if you are not on an assignment, try to make every week at least 4 or 5 contacts. Yeah? Go, visit them, present yourself and what you are good. Yeah? As well as a CV, as a very short PowerPoint presentation. 3 or 4 slides, nothing more. But leave especially the CV behind. Yeah? And then work on it every day. It's a job. Yeah, it's not waiting at the phone, next to the phone until they call you. Yeah? That is how I've seen that people who are successful in this have started and have succeeded.
And I'd like to add, although I'm a moderator, I'd like to add another question to your set of 3 questions, which is basically your past clients are probably the best predictor of your excellence. And what I mean by this is if you have straight, open conversations with past clients and ask them, where would you recognize me as in my unique selling proposition and where you see the most value for money, you have an outside-in perspective. You have a perspective from the client. And the client, if they're really straightforward with you and very open and very frank, they will tell you what are you really good at and will they pay for that competence. Because you can be very good at a market of 0 and nobody will buy it. So the skills are really important, but the market is also important. There has to be a skill market fit. You have to have a great skill set, but also understand what the client really needs and attack that.
Okay.
So I think we've almost passed the hour on our, yes, we've passed 5 minutes. I'd like to ask for everyone a round of applause for the panelist speakers. Muito bem, e com isto pedi ao Jaime Quesado para se juntar aqui no púlpito e fechar a conferência.
Posso falar aqui, não posso? Sim, sim. Boa tarde, eu não sei se é suposto falar em português ou em inglês. Eu tenho a apresentação em inglês porque sei que estão aqui pessoas que não percebem o português, portanto eu se calhar vou falar em inglês, que é para ser mais sensato. Muito bem, portanto, first of all, I'd like to thank to my friend Rui this kind invitation to be here. I know Rui for a long time. We have been involved in the past and in the present in lots of projects, and it's an honor to be here. So I will try to put here with you some reflections about something that I think that became more and more important after the pandemic and within this new crisis we are facing with the inflation, with the Ukraine war, with everything that we are speaking about, that is the new concept of value and the way that it fits with the purpose of the company. Creating value with purpose. I will divide my brief presentation in 3 parts. The first one, the new context we are living. The second one, the new concept of management. Of course, a very, very brief idea. We don't have time for that. And then give some highlights of the new agenda we are facing about. I think that Peter Drucker, that is one of the fathers of management, and we spoke here about management, has more and more a reason, and his words are more than ever updating. As you know, Peter Drucker wrote a lot of articles, especially in Harvard Business Review. He wrote a lot of books. And one of the sentences that he has, and I think it should be fitted here in this conference, is this one: knowledge and information are the strategic reserves for any organization. And this is more and more value. As you know, data, information, is becoming the new raw material for the organizations and for the companies. And of course, the way that we are dealing with data and information is becoming more and more important, especially this frontier that we must define and establish between the open access that we have to information that was given with internet and all the information society agenda, and that need that we have to respect what we can call a certain the privacy in which concerns information, especially with the regulation for that and things like that. But information and knowledge, no, they don't have any success in the organization if we don't have the people, the right talent. And as you know, this is one of the key factors we are facing now, especially because the drivers that mobilize people and talent to be within a project or within an organization are quite different from the ones they were in the past. So organizations must have new incentives, new frontiers to try to attract, first one, and secondly, to retain the most important capital that they have, that is talent. a new context. I have here 5 bullets that I think that summarize in a certain sense, in a certain way, what have been the last 3-4 years. The pandemic, first of all, after all the context of the Ukraine war, the inflation, things like that. First of all, one of the contexts that the organizations have more and more is the question of the rethink. That is a well-known American think tank that is called Rethink, and during the pandemic, especially during the first year, he published a lot of interesting reports. One was Rethinking Humanity. I really recommend it. It's easy. You go to Google, Rethink Humanity, and it was considered for most of the companies and for most of the managers one kind of Bible in terms of trying to settle what should be for the future the main operator conditions in terms of the market and the environment. And I think that first the pandemic and secondly all this new environment we are facing obliged in fact managers to rethink the way they organize their companies, the way they deal with the ecosystem, the suppliers, the customers, the competitors. I think that the message from Michael Porter, as you know, is one of the gurus of management, and he was the owner of the value chain concept some years ago, is more and more valid. We have to rethink our value chain, we have to rethink it internally and rethink it externally. Secondly, one of the aspects that is very, very connected with this crisis is resilience, because I think that most of the managers in the companies, most of the workers, most of the people that deal with the business every day have to gain a new kind of resilience. Resilience has to see with a certain way of trying to manage the expectations, trying that in fact it's possible to be prepared to new factors that in the past they were not considered. The return is of course very related with the after pandemics, but it's also very related with what's going on now. I think Nouriel Roubini, that is one of the most considered economists in the US and everywhere, he wrote yesterday, or before yesterday, in the Project Syndic, that is a very well known and considered think tank in America, a very interesting article about what's going on next year. So he speaks about the stagflation, he speaks about the very huge recession, and in fact the macroeconomic indicators that we have are not, unfortunately, the best ones, either in US or in Europe or even in Asia and China. But I think this is also an opportunity for managers and companies to try to return and, above all, to reinvent their business. I think that for this interim management area and for those that are especially connected with operational activities in the companies, the question of the reinvention of the value chain will be very important. First of all, because we have the digital influence. I think that with the pandemic, as you know, there was an acceleration in the way that companies use the digital as a driver for value creation in the companies. Of course, there was already a digital transformation in course. Most of the companies, either SMEs, but especially the big companies, were operating in their internal value chain with the digital, but of course with the crisis, and especially after the pandemic, there was a new course for the digital use. The hybrid work is one of the most news that the pandemic took to us, of course. It's quite different what's going on now in most of the companies in terms of most of the people having a new scheduling of work, working at home, working in a company, trying to create a new division, what we can consider as the working package in the company. And of course, this is very important for the value creation process. So this is the context of this next normal. The expression new normal was created some years ago by one of the responsibles of McKinsey. It was in 2007, I think, when we had the first crisis in the century, and that responsible for McKinsey created this expression new normal to try to settle, in fact, that we were having a new environment, a new consistency. In order to differentiate from new normal, most of the thinkers and most of the people that deal with the communication nominate now this time we are facing as next normal and not new normal. So, trying to repositionate the concepts of Peter Drucker in terms of management, I think that we have here 4 pillars that are becoming more and more important for what we can consider the new management. First of all, the concept and the context of purpose. Second, the question of governance. Third, the question of trust. And fourth, the question of value. I will say some brief notes about each one. Purpose, it's becoming more and more important. There is a certain confusion between what is vision, what is mission, what is purpose. But I think that the most interesting idea about purpose is that it fits with the feeling that the people that are involved in an organization and in a business are committed with its success for the future. We can speak about personal purpose, about professional purpose. Now it's becoming very interesting that most companies try to recreate this concept of professional and personal purpose, so that the people that are involved in the management try to settle with that. And I think this became more and more one of the key concepts of the new management, the question of purpose. It's important that a company, a manager, a worker, someone that is involved in the business knows effectively what is the purpose of its business. Then we have the concept of governance that is becoming more and more important, because as you know, we have lots of corporate governance models. This is a question that has been treated during the last years. But of course, with this pandemic and with this crisis, the question of the governance became more and more important in companies. We can say that in terms of governance, now we have a new paradigm where it is important to try to establish a commitment between 2 kinds of options. Firstly, to try to fit the rules, and of course to have a formal governance. Because of that, as you know, it's important that the company is able to be responsible for its community, for its stakeholders, for its shareholders. So this idea of social responsibility that fits with what we can say a more formal corporate governance. But at the same time, it's important that managers are capable to have a more and more effective agility to try to respond to the turbulence of the time. So agility at once, it's important to try to have new responses, new answers for the census. And second, the question of formal. And this new governance, of course, will be treated in terms of the best way for the companies. Of course, it's quite different to have a governance model for a big company or a big group when we have the holdings, the way that the companies fit with the holdings, things like that. And when we have a small company where this question of the agility will become more and more important, because it's important that despite the formal rules that each one has in the company, there is the capacity to try to establish a certain agility in terms of integrating the competences. The question of trust is becoming more important, because if we don't have trust inside our organization, and if we don't have trust within our stakeholders, it will be very difficult to have success in our business. This question of trust is becoming more and more important, especially because some of the problems that most of the companies face during the last 10 years in terms of the perception that the market have about them. And you can say 2 things about this concept of trust. First of all, the internal trust has to see a lot with the way that the people that work in the company fit with the organization and the management and the responsibles. So there has to be a trust between all of them. And the trust within the ecosystem is to see with what we can say situations like reputation, perception. It will be very difficult for a company to manage the value chain in the future if there is not a contract of trust between the company, the stakeholders, the suppliers, the clients, and this is very, very, very crucial in the future. Finally, the question of value. How do we measure value in the company? Of course, we have lots of ways to measure value. But I would like to put here one concept that I think is becoming more and more important, and that was also settled by Michael Porter some years ago, that is a question of shared value. So the idea is that the value that is created in the company, and of course that must be distributed by the shareholders and most of the times by the workers, but it must be also at the same time given a certain amount of the value to the community. this has to see with this idea of social responsibility, the way that the company is integrated in the community, in their way of working and valuing, and I think that the shared value will be more and more a way of measuring the perception of the company. Of course, this has to see also with the sustainability agenda and the way that especially the younger generations see the companies drive. So within this new context, we have, of course, a new concept for management. And I have here a slide where I try to make a commitment between two kinds of things that I think are becoming more and more important in the companies. The first one is the idea of innovation. Of course, companies that don't have an innovation agenda will have difficulties in the future in trying to maintain their position in the market. We speak especially about the concept of open innovation. That is a concept that was developed some years ago by Randstad, that is a well-known Harvard professor. And Randstad spoke about this idea of a permanent dialogue between the company, the customers, and the suppliers. We have a very good example on this, that is the iPhone from Apple. The iPhone was possible only because Apple and Steve Jobs and the people have a permanent contact with the suppliers, but especially with the customers, and they introduced in the product the expectations of the market. So we can say that the more the company is available to integrate in the service, in the products, the expectations and the reasons of the market, of the customers, the more success it will have. But of course, this innovation has to be a driver of value, because most of the times what we see in the companies, there is a tendency to create a lot of innovation, but the value is not right. So we have between this balance between innovation and value to have, of course, a permanent agenda of creation, testing, monitorization, evaluation, prototyping. We have, as you know, a very well-known agenda for that is the design thinking that was created some years ago in Silicon Valley by IDEO, that is a well-known company. And the idea is always this one. We have a new idea, we have a new prototype, but of course all this has to fit with the first objective of the company, that is to create more value, to create more capacity for the customers. And in which concerns this value creation process, I think that we have now three aspects that are becoming more and more important. In a recent Harvard Business Review article about the new strategic agendas for the future, there was these three aspects that I think are very, very interesting for what we are speaking here about. The first one is concerned with value training. So the idea of values is something that must be incorporated in the organization so that every responsible for the company, either the high-level manager, the medium manager, the workers, all the advisors, have in permanent way a value training creation process. But the value has to have a content. That's to say, we have to understand what is the purpose of the value creation process in our company. So we must fit, in fact, what is our value. It must be an objective of EBITDA for this year. It must be an increase in the exports in the Czech market, but of course the value must be an integrated process. And then it must be a process that is in action. So the value creation process must be created in the day-by-day of the company, and we have now with the balance scorecards and other new maps that, as you know, advise the company the way to do this kind of action. Let me see. So, we have the context, we have the concept. What are now the new topics and the new brands that are essential for the companies developing their business? The one that is in the top, and it was already spoken here, is sustainability. So everything now is sustainability. We have the ESGs, we have the agenda for the climate, we have the reports of the companies that now incorporate a very important area of sustainability. But I think in which concerns sustainability, I would put 2 points. The first one is the perception in the company that the sustainability is something very important in the process. And the most important is the perception that the market has that the company has a sustainability agenda. This will be decisive in some services and products. Even, for instance, in the financial areas, you know, most of the banks in the future will be evaluated according to their sustainability agenda. And the new generation, especially, have a strong commitment with this, and it will be essential for the companies to have this agenda operational. The second one has to see with quality, but quality in a differentiated concept. The quality is something that must be embraced in the organization as a total. We had in the past, as you know, the quality agenda that was especially developed in Japan and in other countries with lots of studies and agendas. But I think now the quality question has to see special with this idea of a quality organization. So we see an organization and we see that this organization is an example, is a good practice of quality in the process, in the service, and in the environment that it provides to the market. The digital, we spoke about it, but of course the question that has to see with the digital is the company must have a smart use of the digital. The digital has lots of dimensions, lots of tools, but of course the one most important aspect for the company is that the digital must be a driver for the company to be smarter. We speak now a lot about this idea of smart company, but when we speak about smart company, it's in the way that the company is prepared to give the right answers to the market. We spoke already about the question in innovation, and of course efficiency is also another aspect. And to conclude, creating value with purpose, we could define that in 4 pillars very, very, very shortly. First of all, we need more organization with more innovation. That's to say, it is not enough innovation. It is also necessary organization. That's to say, there must be a commitment between the capacity that the company has to develop new innovation process, new innovation service, new innovation process, but at the same time, this must be integrated in the organization. So innovation has to see with the organization. The second one has to see with the way that the company deals with the market. And the idea of network is becoming more and more important, especially for the SMEs. There is today a very interesting article in the Financial Times about the German model. The German model, the German business model, as you know, was and is very concentrated in the idea of the Mittelstand, that is the small and medium companies that work in cooperation, and this is a success because they have a network agenda. So it's important to develop this network agenda in order to have more and more impact. And we have some examples. We have the example of the clusters, that is a concept that was developed by Michael Porter. We have in Portugal here some very good clusters like the ITC, Dago Foods, that was stressed by the market from Brazil, and other ones. At the same time, the value chain management will be more and more important. It is essential that the company and the managers of the company has a permanent contact with the value chain. So, which is my procurement agenda? Most of the times, it's so important to buy well as to sell well, and the procurement agenda is the first aspect of the value chain agenda. So I have to buy well in terms of price, of cost, in terms of quality of the materials and things like that. And as you know, with the disruptions that we have now within the crisis, this is one important aspect for most of the companies. We have to have a very operational and efficient agenda. Now we have a very important aspect in which concerns some resources. The energy, the cost of energy is becoming more and more important for most of the companies, especially for the industrial ones. The question of the people, the talent. What kind of people do I have? How much do I pay to them? Are they the right people for the company and for what I'm doing? And of course, the question of the market that has to see with the relations with the market. And finally, one aspect that I think is becoming important, and I will conclude with that, that is the example of good practice. I think that we are in a time in which it is very important to try to demonstrate to the community the example of the good practice. In the past here in Portugal, some years ago, we had some experience that were developed by the companies within the government that was to try to organize what we call the actions of demonstration. For instance, a company decided to launch a new product. or decide to launch a new model of organization, and the community, the suppliers, the customers, the competitors, the advisors were invited to be within the company in some hours to try to discuss this idea. So the good practice, I think, is a very good example, and I think it can be a good way to try to create value with purpose. So it was this idea that I have, and again, thank you very much for the invitation.
Bem, e com isto vamos fechar a agenda, porque já estamos a impedir os senhores de irem para o almoço, mas eu queria, antes de mais, pedir à atual direção e aos oradores para se juntarem no palco como forma de agradecimento e para mostrar a cara que está por detrás da Associação de Interim Management. Por isso, o Carlos deve estar aí algures, o Martin está a chegar, o Rui, o Mário
e a Luísa.
A Luísa também. Não sejam tímidos, já basta a audiência. Don't be shy. E já agora também iria pedir aos oradores para se juntarem. Can you the speakers join us as well?
Um bocadinho mais para lá, um bocadinho mais para lá.
Já agora, nós procuramos ter aqui alguma igualdade de género. Importante. É só por isso que está aqui a Luísa. Não, mas agora a sério, há bastantes mais mulheres na direção que infelizmente não estão cá.
Não, foi um prazer.